The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Warp fields bend spacetime according to predictable equations. Transporters convert matter to energy and back again through established protocols. Even the most exotic phenomena, subspace anomalies, temporal distortions, quantum singularities, eventually yield to scientific analysis and rational explanation. But what happens when 7 impossible signatures materialize simultaneously across Federation space, each one defying every sensor, every theory, every rational explanation the galaxy's greatest minds can offer? If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. Captain Jean-Luc Picard stood on the bridge of the USS Enterprise-D, his eyes fixed on the view screen where a visual representation of the phenomenon rotated in 3 dimensions. Behind him, Lieutenant Commander Data's fingers flew across his console with inhuman precision, golden eyes processing information at speeds that would overwhelm any organic mind. "Captain," Data reported, his tone carrying that unique quality of fascinated confusion that only an android could produce, "I am detecting 7 distinct energy signatures across a radius of 43 light-years. Each signature is generating readings that should not be possible within our understanding of physics." "Specify, Mr. Data." Picard's voice remained calm, but his fingers drummed once against the armrest of his command chair. A tell that Commander William Riker recognized as suppressed concern. The first signature, located 0.3 parsecs from our current position, is emitting a form of radiation that resembles solar output but operates at an efficiency level of approximately 12,000% beyond theoretical maximum. The second signature, near Starbase 84, appears to be shifting through subspace layers at velocities that exceed warp 9.99, yet is somehow remaining stationary in normal space. The third. "Captain." Lieutenant Worf's deep voice cut through Data's analysis. The Klingon security chief's hands moved across tactical with practiced efficiency. "I am detecting weapons fire at Starbase 84. No ships in the vicinity. The weapons themselves appear to be materializing from subspace." Picard rose from his chair, tugging down his uniform tunic in that unconscious gesture of preparation. "Red alert. Helm, set course for Starbase 84, maximum warp. Mr. Worf, hail the Starbase. Unable to establish communication, sir. Their communications array has been disabled. Reading multiple hull breaches on the outer docking ring." On the view screen, the stars elongated into streaks as the Enterprise leapt to warp 9. Picard felt the subtle vibration through the deck plates. The ship's powerful engines pushing against the fundamental fabric of spacetime itself. "Data, what kind of weapons are we dealing with?" "Unknown, Captain. The energy signatures do not match any known weapons technology in our database. Phaser, disruptor, photon torpedo, quantum torpedo, polaron beam, negative on all classifications. If I were capable of speculation, I would suggest these weapons are not technology at all." Approaching Starbase 84, Ensign Crusher announced from the con. Dropping to impulse. The view screen resolved into normal space, and what Picard saw made his jaw tighten. Starbase 84 hung against the darkness, its familiar mushroom shape marred by scorched hull plating and venting atmosphere. But the starbase wasn't what held his attention. Between the Enterprise and the wounded station, 2 figures floated in the vacuum of space, figures that should have been impossible. One was a woman, tall and athletic, clad in armor that seemed to be forged from bronze and crimson, a golden tiara catching the light of the distant star. Her dark hair flowed around her head as though she stood in atmosphere rather than hard vacuum, and in her hand she held a sword that glowed with an inner light. The other figure was a man, powerfully built, wearing a suit of blue and red with a cape that shouldn't have been able to move in airless space but somehow rippled as though caught by an eternal wind. His eyes, Picard could see them even at this distance, glowing with an eerie red luminescence. "Shields up," Picard ordered quietly. "Mr. Worf, scan those individuals." Scanning, sir. Worf's expression was one of pure Klingon suspicion. The female reads as humanoid but with cellular density approximately 3 times that of a human. Her weapon is generating an energy field that should not be sustainable without a visible power source. The male, Worf paused, rechecking his readings. Captain, the male is absorbing solar radiation at a rate that would overwhelm our deflector shields. His cellular structure is storing this energy in a manner I cannot explain. And sir, he is looking directly at us. Indeed, the floating man had turned his head toward the Enterprise. Even across the gulf of space, Picard felt the weight of that gaze. It was not hostile, exactly, but it was measuring. Evaluating. And behind those glowing eyes lay a power that made the ship's warp core seem like a child's toy. Hail them, Picard ordered. Sir, they are in vacuum, Worf objected. They cannot possibly. Hail them anyway, Mr. Worf. A moment of silence, then the comm system crackled to life with a voice that carried absolute authority tempered by genuine concern. Starship Enterprise, this is Superman of the Justice League. We mean you no harm. We were defending your station from hostile forces that followed us through, whatever brought us here. The immediate threat has been neutralized, but your facility requires assistance. Multiple hull breaches, casualties on decks 7 through 12. Picard exchanged a glance with Riker, whose expression mirrored his own mixture of fascination and caution. A being that could survive vacuum, speak across comm frequencies without technology, and casually deflect weapons fire that could damage a starbase was either an unprecedented first contact or an unprecedented threat. This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise. You are in Federation space, and I must ask you to. The woman's voice joined the channel, melodic but carrying the steel of a trained warrior. Captain, we can explain our presence, but first your wounded need attention. My companion and I can assist with rescue operations if you'll permit us to approach your vessel. Negative, Worf interjected before Picard could respond. Captain, allowing unknown entities with their level of power aboard the Enterprise would be. The comm channel crackled with a third voice, this one colder, more analytical. Your security chief is wise to be cautious, Captain. But if we intended harm, your ship would already be compromised. I've been monitoring your systems for the past 30 seconds. Your deflector shield modulation frequency is rotating on a pattern that repeats every 0.47 seconds. Your weapons are Type X phaser arrays with a maximum output of 5.1 megawatts. Impressive for your level of technology, but not a deterrent to my colleagues. However, we're not here as conquerors. We're here because we had no choice. Picard's blood ran cold. That voice had come from inside the ship. Computer, locate the source of that transmission. Source, main engineering. Intruder alert, main engineering. All security teams to engineering. Worf was already moving toward the turbolift, his hand on his phaser. Captain. Belay that, Mr. Worf. Picard's mind raced through options. If this intruder could bypass their shields, sensors, and security systems so easily, a direct confrontation would be futile. Computer, open a channel to main engineering. Channel open. This is Captain Picard. Identify yourself and state your intentions. A pause, then the voice responded with what might have been grudging respect. You're trying to buy time while you figure out how to deal with me. Smart. I'm Batman, and I'm in your engineering section because I needed to understand what kind of technology I'm dealing with before making contact. Your matter-antimatter reactor is fascinating, by the way. Crude compared to what I've seen, but the elegance of the magnetic confinement system shows sophisticated engineering. I haven't touched anything. I'm simply observing. Observing is one thing. Breaking into a Starfleet vessel is quite another. Picard kept his voice level. You and your companions have approximately 30 seconds to explain yourselves before I classify you as hostile forces and respond accordingly. Acknowledged. During the battle, one of your vessels appeared through an anomaly near our position. Some kind of experimental drive system. When Darkseid's portal technology intersected with your ship's energy signature, it created a cascade reaction. The last thing I remember is trying to shield my teammates from the explosion. Then we were, here. Wherever here is. Data's console chimed urgently. Captain, I am now detecting the other 4 signatures. One has materialized on the surface of Starbase 84, appearing to phase through solid matter. Another is moving at high velocity toward our position, velocity now exceeding warp factor limitations while in normal space, which should be impossible. The third is in the Rigel system, approximately 3 light-years distant. The fourth, Data's expression achieved something close to wonder. The fourth is interfacing with our computer core. I am detecting an intelligence that is partially organic, partially technological, attempting to communicate through our network. On the view screen, a streak of yellow lightning resolved into another impossible figure, a man in red armor that crackled with barely contained energy, standing on the Enterprise's hull as though gravity had meaning in the void. He waved at the view screen with the casual friendliness of someone encountering neighbors over a fence. Captain, Counselor Deanna Troi spoke up from her seat beside Riker, her dark eyes distant as she focused her empathic senses. I'm sensing no deception from these beings. Confusion, yes. Disorientation. And underneath it all, a profound sense of duty and protection. They're not invaders, sir. They're lost. Picard made his decision. It was the kind of calculated risk that had defined his career, the choice to extend trust when all logic suggested caution. Mr. Data, stand down red alert but maintain yellow alert status. Commander Riker, prepare to receive guests in Transporter Room 3. Have Dar. Crusher and a full medical team standing by. Mr. Worf. Sir. The Klingon's tone suggested he already knew and disapproved of what was coming. Escort our guest from main engineering to the observation lounge. And Mr. Worf. Treat him as a dignitary, not a prisoner. For now. As the crew moved to execute his orders, Picard allowed himself one moment of uncertainty. 7 beings with power that defied explanation, scattered across Federation space, claiming to be heroes from another universe. The observation lounge felt smaller with Batman in it. He stood near the viewport, a shadow against the stars, his cape somehow darker than the void beyond. The cowl concealed most of his face, but Picard could see the sharp line of his jaw and the calculating intelligence in the white lenses covering his eyes. Unlike his companions who had arrived in the transporter room moments ago, Batman had simply walked through the ship's corridors as though he belonged there, Worf trailing behind with obvious frustration. Superman sat at the conference table with the relaxed posture of someone who had nothing to prove. Up close, Picard could see the fine details of his uniform, the textured surface of the blue material, the stylized S emblem that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. The man's face was open, earnest, carrying the kind of fundamental decency that Picard recognized in his best officers. But those eyes held something else, the weight of impossible choices and the exhaustion of someone who carried worlds on his shoulders. Wonder Woman stood beside Superman, and Picard found himself unconsciously straightening his posture in her presence. She radiated authority the way some people radiated heat. Her armor was clearly functional rather than ceremonial. Scored with marks from weapons that should have pierced it but hadn't. The sword at her side hummed with a frequency that made the ship's structural integrity field resonate in sympathy. The Flash, as he'd introduced himself in a rapid-fire explanation that outpaced even Data's processing speed, vibrated slightly in his chair, as though standing still required constant effort. Picard had watched the security footage of his arrival. One moment empty corridor, the next a streak of yellow lightning resolving into a man who'd apologized for accidentally running through 3 bulkheads before figuring out how to stop. Dr. Crusher had examined them all in sickbay, her medical tricorder providing readings that made no sense. Superman's cellular structure somehow converted solar radiation into an energy that defied thermodynamic laws. Wonder Woman's biology was human but enhanced by what the tricorder classified as thaumaturgic resonance, which was the computer's way of admitting it had encountered something beyond scientific classification. The Flash's metabolism operated at speeds that should have ignited his blood plasma. Batman was the only one who registered as baseline human, yet Crusher had quietly informed Picard that the man's bone density, muscle fiber composition, and neural processing speed all pushed the absolute limits of human potential. "Thank you for your patience," Picard began, taking his seat at the head of the table. Riker sat to his right, Troy to his left. Data stood at the science station, recording everything. Worf remained near the door, his hand never straying far from his phaser. "I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard, commanding officer of the USS Enterprise. This is Commander William Riker, my first officer, Lieutenant Commander Data, Operations Officer, Counselor Deanna Troi, and Lieutenant Worf, Chief of Security." Clark Kent, Superman offered with a slight smile that somehow made him seem more human despite everything he'd demonstrated. "Though most people call me Superman. This is Diana Prince, Wonder Woman. Bruce Wayne, though he prefers Batman. And Barry Allen, the Flash." Picard noted the use of dual identities with interest. These beings maintained civilian personas despite possessing power that could reshape worlds. "You mentioned you were fighting an invasion when you arrived here. Mr. Wayne, you claimed one of our vessels appeared in your universe during this conflict." Batman's voice was gravelly, shaped by something that made Picard think of smoke and night. "A ship matching Federation design materialized 17,000 kilometers from Earth during our engagement with Darkseid's forces. It was attempting some kind of experimental propulsion system. I caught fragments of subspace telemetry before it destabilized. When Darkseid opened a boom tube to retreat, the energies intersected. The resulting explosion created a cascade effect across dimensional boundaries." "Boom tube?" Data inquired. "A tunnel through space-time," Superman explained. "Darkseid uses them to transport armies across interstellar distances instantly. They operate on principles that your physics probably classify as impossible." "We classify many things as impossible until we understand them," Picard replied carefully. "In your universe, do beings with your abilities, metahumans, I believe Dr. Crusher termed them, interact with baseline human governments?" "We work alongside them," Wonder Woman said, her voice carrying an accent that Picard couldn't quite place. "Greek, perhaps, but ancient Greek. We protect Earth and its people, but we don't rule them. We're heroes, Captain, not conquerors." "Heroes." Picard let the word settle. "An interesting distinction. In the Federation, we've learned to be cautious of individuals who position themselves as protectors without accountability." Batman's cowled head tilted slightly. "You're wondering if we're a threat? If 7 beings with our capabilities could destabilize your society?" The thought had occurred to me, yes. "Good." Batman moved from the viewport, his cape flowing with a dramatic flourish that seemed theatrical until Picard realized it served to obscure his movements. "If you weren't concerned, I'd question your competence. We are a threat, Captain. Not intentionally, but by our mere presence. Superman alone could dismantle most of your defensive infrastructure before you could respond. Diana's fought gods. Barry could steal every secret in your database before your computer registered the breach. And he paused. I've already mapped 17 critical vulnerabilities in your ship's systems." Worf's hand moved to his phaser. "That sounds like a threat." "It's an assessment," Batman corrected. "We're showing you respect by being honest about what we are. In our universe, we've spent years building trust with governments and militaries. Here, you don't know us. You shouldn't trust us. But you should understand that if we meant harm, this would be a very different conversation." The Flash raised his hand like a student in class. "Can I just say that the threatening speech isn't helping? We're the good guys. We save people. It's literally what we do." "Mr. Allen," Picard began. "Barry, please. Mr. Allen makes me sound like my dad. Barry, then. I don't doubt your intentions. But good intentions without proper oversight have caused some of the greatest catastrophes in galactic history. The Federation operates under a principle called the Prime Directive. We don't interfere in the natural development of civilizations, even when we possess the power to help them. Superman leaned forward, his expression troubled. You just let people suffer when you could save them? We prevent ourselves from imposing our values and technology on societies that haven't developed them naturally, Picard said firmly. Every time a more advanced civilization has interfered with a less advanced one, the results have been cultural contamination, dependency, or outright collapse. That's not help, Superman said quietly. That's abandonment. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Picard saw his crew shift uncomfortably. This was the heart of it. The fundamental philosophical divide that could either bridge or destroy any chance of cooperation. We've learned through painful experience that playing God, even with the best intentions, ultimately does more harm than good. Wonder Woman's eyes flashed. We've met gods, Captain. Real gods, from Olympus and beyond. We don't play at divinity. We use our gifts to protect those who cannot protect themselves. That is the oath we swore. And what happens when those you protect become dependent on your intervention? Troy asked gently. When they stop solving their own problems because they're waiting for you to save them? That's why we inspire them, the Flash said, his tone surprisingly serious. We show people what's possible. We give them hope. Or you create a civilization of children, Riker interjected, always looking to the sky for their protectors rather than standing on their own. Batman's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, a tell that Picard recognized as approval. Your first officer makes a valid point. We've had this debate in our own universe. The question of whether superheroes enable or disable human agency. And what conclusion did you reach? Data asked with genuine curiosity. That it depends on how you approach it, Superman answered. We don't solve every problem. We handle threats that would overwhelm normal response capabilities. Alien invasions, disasters, villains with abilities that match our own. We give people room to be their best selves. Picard studied the man across from him. There was something almost naive in Superman's worldview, yet it was a naivety tempered by experience. This was someone who had seen darkness and chosen to remain a symbol of light. Your philosophy assumes you can determine which problems require your intervention and which don't. That assumes an infallibility I find troubling. We're not infallible, Superman admitted. We've made mistakes. But we don't let the fear of making mistakes paralyze us into inaction. The comm system chirped. Bridge to Captain Picard. Go ahead. Sir, we're receiving distress calls from 3 Federation colonies in Sector 441. They're under attack by unidentified vessels. Starbase Operations is requesting any available ships respond. Picard and Superman locked eyes across the table. In that moment, Picard saw what would happen next as clearly as if it had already occurred. The Justice League would want to help. They would see people in danger and every instinct would demand they act. And he would have to make a choice about whether to enable them or constrain them. Helm, set course for Sector 441, maximum warp. Time to arrival. 47 minutes at maximum warp, sir. Superman stood. We could be there in seconds. Sit down, Mr. Kent. Picard's voice carried command authority that had silenced admirals. You are guests aboard my vessel, and while I appreciate your offer, you will not be charging into Federation space dispensing justice according to your own parameters. Is that understood? The tension crystallized. The Flash looked between Superman and Picard like he was watching a tennis match. Wonder Woman's hand drifted toward her sword. Batman remained perfectly still, analyzing. Superman's jaw set in a way that suggested he was very familiar with authority figures trying to restrain him. Captain, I understand your concern, but people are dying right now. Every second we waste in debate is a second I could spend saving lives. And every action you take without understanding the context, the political ramifications, or the cultural considerations could save those lives while simultaneously creating a diplomatic incident that kills thousands more, Picard shot back. This is not your universe, Mr. Kent. You don't know the factions, the treaties, or the consequences. Then brief us on the way, Wonder Woman said, her tone brooking no argument. We're warriors, Captain. We understand tactics and strategy. Use us or don't, but don't ask us to sit idle while people suffer. Picard saw his crew watching him, waiting for his decision. This was the test, not of the Justice League's abilities, but of their willingness to operate within a framework larger than their own judgment. Very well. You'll accompany an away team under Commander Riker's authority. You will follow Starfleet protocols. You will not engage unless ordered to do so. And you will accept that in Federation space, your power does not grant you the right to act unilaterally. Agreed? Superman held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Agreed. But Picard saw what everyone else in the room saw. Superman had agreed to try. Not to comply absolutely, but to try. And when the moment came, when lives hung in the balance and orders conflicted with conscience, they would discover whether heroes from another universe could exist in a galaxy governed by laws rather than legends. Mr. Worf, prepare an armed security detail. Commander Riker, you have tactical command. I want constant updates. And Commander, keep them on a short leash. As the Justice League filed out with Riker and Worf, Batman paused at the doorway and looked back at Picard. Captain, in our universe, I've worked with governments and militaries for years. I understand chains of command and political necessity. But here's what you need to understand about the people you just tried to constrain: when the moment comes, they'll do what's right. Not what's legal. Not what's politically expedient. What's right. I hope your protocols can accommodate that. Then he was gone, a shadow among shadows, leaving Picard alone with Data and Troy. Captain, Data ventured, that interaction had a 93% probability of creating future conflict. I know, Mr. Data. They're good people, Troy said softly. But they're used to being the ultimate authority. The final word in any crisis. Then they're about to receive a comprehensive education in humility, Picard replied, settling back into his chair and watching the stars streak past at warp speed. And I suspect we're all about to learn whether heroism can coexist with protocol. On the view screen, the chronometer counted down the minutes until they reached Sector 441. Picard wondered which would prove stronger, the Justice League's oath to protect, or the Federation's commitment to non-interference. Something told him the answer would define not just their relationship with these newcomers, but the Federation's understanding of what it meant to wield power responsibly. The universe had just become infinitely more complicated. The colonies in Sector 441 burned. Commander Riker materialized on the surface of New Providence with the away team, phasers drawn, and immediately understood why the distress calls had been so desperate. The settlement sprawled across a verdant valley that should have been paradise, Federation colonial architecture blending seamlessly with native vegetation, biosphere domes glinting in the light of twin suns. Now half those domes were shattered, smoke rising from dozens of impact craters, and overhead, 3 sleek vessels circled like predators. Orion Syndicate, Worf growled, his tricorder analyzing the ship's signatures. Slave raiders. They've been targeting outlying colonies for months. Beside Riker, Superman's jaw tightened as his enhanced hearing picked up sounds no human could detect, screams from collapsed buildings, children crying in the rubble, the whine of disruptor fire in the distance. His fists clenched, and Riker saw the muscles in his neck cord with the effort of restraint. Orders, Commander. Wonder Woman asked, her hand on her sword hilt. She'd insisted on bringing her weapons over Worf's objections, and now Riker was grateful for her restraint in not simply drawing them. We establish a perimeter around the civilian evacuation zone N. A disruptor bolt screamed past Riker's head, and suddenly the Orion Raiders were on them. 6 green-skinned slavers in patchwork armor emerged from behind a collapsed structure, weapons raised. Standard Syndicate tactics: hit fast, grab whoever you can, get out before Starfleet responds. Worf's phaser dropped 3 before they could fire again. The security team scattered to defensive positions with practiced efficiency. Targeted the civilians huddled behind an overturned transport, his disruptor charging for a wide dispersal blast that would stun everyone in a 15-meter radius. Superman moved. One moment he stood beside Riker. The next, he was simply there, 20 meters away, his body interposed between the Orion and the civilians. The disruptor fired. The energy bolt that should have stunned 24 people struck Superman's chest and dissipated like water against stone. The Orion's eyes widened in shock that transformed instantly to fear. "Nobody else gets hurt," Superman said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made even Riker's blood run cold. Not a threat. A promise. A fundamental law of physics that the universe would bend to accommodate. The Orion swung his disruptor like a club. Superman caught it one-handed, crushed the weapon into scrap metal, and then, with a gentleness that seemed impossible given his strength, pushed the slaver backward. Not through. Pushed. The Orion stumbled, fell, and when he looked up, Superman was offering him a hand. "Stay down," Superman advised. "This doesn't have to get worse." But it did get worse, because the Orion Raiders aboard the orbiting vessels had noticed their ground team's predicament. Transporter signatures blossomed across Riker's tricorder, 30 more slavers materializing throughout the colony, all armed, all desperate. And overhead, one of the Syndicate ships broke orbit, angling its weapons toward the planet's surface. "They're targeting the main settlement." Worf shouted. 2,000 colonists, no time to evacuate. Wonder Woman was already moving, her legs pumping with speed that blurred her form. But she wasn't fast enough. None of them were fast enough. The ship's disruptor banks glowed with gathering energy, and Riker knew with sick certainty that he was about to watch 2,000 people die because Starfleet protocol demanded they wait for the Enterprise to arrive, demanded they follow proper engagement procedures, demanded they. A streak of yellow lightning shot skyward. The flash hit the Syndicate ship at a velocity that transformed him into a kinetic missile. The impact sent the vessel spinning out of control, its disruptor banks misfiring into empty space. But Barry Allen didn't stop. Riker watched in awe as the speedster ran along the ship's hull, vibrating his molecules to phase through the armor plating, disappearing inside. 17 seconds later, Riker counted. The Flash reappeared on the ground, deposited 37 stunned Orion Raiders in a neat pile, and grinned. Disarmed the ship, disabled their weapons, tied up the crew. "Nobody's dead. You're welcome." "You were ordered not to engage," Worf said, his phaser still raised, torn between protocol and pragmatism. "Yeah, well, I'm really bad at following orders when people are about to die." Barry's grin faded. "Look, I know you've got rules, but those rules were about to get 2,000 people killed. So I broke them. Court-martial me later. Right now we've got more incoming." He was right. Riker's tricorder showed 4 more Syndicate vessels dropping out of warp, larger ships with heavier weapons. These weren't raiders. These were warships, responding to the distress calls from their ground teams. "Enterprise, this is Riker. We need immediate tactical support. Multiple hostile vessels, colony at risk." Picard's voice came back tight with concern. "Commander, we're still 19 minutes out. Can you hold?" Riker looked at the incoming ships, calculated firing solutions and civilian casualties, and knew the answer was no. By every tactical assessment he'd ever learned at Starfleet Academy, they couldn't hold. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and out of time. Wonder Woman drew her sword, and it sang with a note that made reality shiver. Commander Riker, I understand your protocols. I respect your chain of command. But I took an oath long before you were born, on an island where gods still walk, to protect the innocent from those who would do them harm. That oath doesn't recognize borders or jurisdictions. Those ships mean to enslave these people. I will not permit it. She didn't wait for permission. She simply leaped, a vertical ascent that should have been impossible, her body arcing into the sky like an arrow loosed from a bow. Riker watched her rise 300 meters, 400, trajectory perfect, and then she was among the descending ships. Her sword struck the first vessel's shield emitter, and the blade, forged by gods, blessed by Olympus, sheared through technology like it was paper. The shields collapsed. She landed on the hull, her strength allowing her to grip the metal with one hand while the other drove her sword through the ship's primary weapons array. "My gods," one of the security officers whispered. Superman looked at Riker, and in his eyes was an apology and a challenge. "Sir, I know you need to maintain control. I know you need us to follow your rules. But right now, your rules are getting in the way of saving lives. So I'm asking you to make a choice, let us help, or try to stop us. Because either way, we're not letting these people become slaves." Riker's mind raced through protocols, regulations, Prime Directive considerations, diplomatic consequences. And then he thought about 2,000 colonists who would be dead or enslaved while he debated procedure. He thought about what Captain Picard had said. That good intentions without oversight caused catastrophes. But he also thought about what the captain had done 100 times, bent the rules when lives hung in the balance. "Mr. Worf," Riker said quietly, "you didn't hear me give any orders." "Understood." Worf's expression was pure Klingon approval. "I heard nothing, Commander." Superman nodded once, then launched himself skyward with such force that the ground cracked beneath his feet. He reached the Syndicate warships in seconds, and what happened next would be analyzed by Starfleet Tactical for years to come. He didn't destroy the ships. He disabled them. Precision applications of strength that crushed weapons systems without breaching hulls, that shattered engine manifolds without igniting warp cores, that left the crews shaken but alive. It was violence as surgery, brutal in its efficiency, but controlled with a care that revealed something profound about the man wielding it. Wonder Woman moved between ships like a dancer, her sword an extension of her will. Every strike found a critical system. Every movement was economy personified. She fought the way Worf wished he could fight, with the skill of a warrior born to battle but the discipline of someone who'd had millennia to master restraint. And high above them all, the Flash became a streak of lightning that connected the dots between disasters before they could happen. A transporter beam targeting civilians, he was there, vibrating the colonists out of phase so the beam grabbed nothing. An escape pod jettisoning toward the colony at terminal velocity, he caught it, matched its speed, decelerated it to a safe landing. Orion reinforcements beaming down to the surface, he disarmed them before their molecules fully resolved. In 4 minutes and 37 seconds, the Justice League neutralized a threat that should have required a full Starfleet tactical response. And they did it without killing a single attacker. When Superman landed beside Riker again, the settlement was secure. The Syndicate ships hung dead in orbit, their crews stunned and awaiting Starfleet custody. The ground forces were bound and disarmed. And 2,000 colonists were alive, safe, staring at their saviors with a mixture of awe and terror. No casualties, Superman reported. Syndicate forces neutralized. We made sure everyone survived, theirs and yours. Riker looked at the scene, at the sheer impossible efficiency of what had just occurred, and felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. Because yes, lives had been saved. Yes, the outcome was better than any alternative. But something fundamental had just shifted, and he wasn't sure the galaxy was ready for it. "Commander," one of the colonists approached, a middle-aged woman with tears streaming down her face. "Who are they? Where did they come from?" "That's classified," Riker said automatically, but he could see the words were meaningless. How do you classify beings who just redefine possible? How do you keep secret the existence of heroes who could reshape the balance of power across the entire Alpha Quadrant? Batman materialized beside them, literally. Riker realized with a start, the man had been here the entire time, simply invisible in the chaos, and his voice was quiet enough that only Riker could hear. You're thinking about what happens next. About what this means for your Federation. You're right to be concerned. They'll want to weaponize you, Riker said bluntly. Starfleet, the Klingon, the Romulans, everyone who saw what just happened will want to control you or eliminate you. They can try. Batman's tone suggested he'd already calculated 17 countermeasures. But that's a problem for later. Right now, you need to decide what you're going to tell your captain. Because from where I'm standing, you just made a choice to enable us rather than constrain us. And that choice has consequences. Riker's combadge chirped. Enterprise to away team. Commander, we've arrived in orbit. Status report. Riker looked at Superman, at Wonder Woman descending from the sky, at the Flash vibrating with barely contained energy, at Batman who watched everything and revealed nothing. He thought about Starfleet's carefully maintained balance of power, about treaties and protocols and all the structures that kept the Federation running. Then he thought about 2,000 people who were alive because 3 beings from another universe had decided that rules mattered less than lives. Enterprise, the situation is resolved. The colony is secure. Syndicate forces are in custody. But sir, we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. Explain. The Justice League just saved New Providence Colony, Captain. And every colonist saw them do it. There's no way to keep this quiet. A long pause. Then Picard's voice, heavy with the weight of understanding, bring them back to the ship, Commander. It seems we need to have a more extensive conversation about the price of heroism. As the transporter engaged and reality dissolved into quantum flux, Riker caught Superman's expression, not triumphant, but troubled. The Man of Steel understood what Riker understood, they'd won the battle. But the real fight, the one over what it meant to wield power in a galaxy governed by laws, was just beginning. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, other factions were already learning about the beings who just announced their presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. The Enterprise's observation lounge had become a war room. Picard stood at the viewport, hands clasped behind his back, watching the stars slide past at warp 6. Behind him, the table was crowded with people who shouldn't exist and officers trying to process what they just witnessed through the security footage. Show me again, Picard said quietly. Data replayed the recording from Riker's combadge. For minutes and 37 seconds condensed into high-definition proof that everything Starfleet understood about tactical engagement had just become obsolete. Superman moving between ships with casual invincibility. Wonder Woman's sword carving through shields that should have been impenetrable. The Flash resolving problems before they could fully materialize. Computer, calculate how many Starfleet vessels would have been required to achieve the same result with 0 casualties on both sides. Insufficient data. No Starfleet engagement in the database matches these parameters. Probability of 0 casualty outcome in similar scenarios, less than 0.03%. Picard turned to face the table. Mr. Data, your assessment. Captain, the Justice League's intervention was tactically flawless. They neutralized a superior force without loss of life, protected civilians, and maintained structural integrity of enemy vessels for later salvage and intelligence gathering. By every measurable standard, they executed a perfect military operation. And by unmeasurable standards, Data tilted his head. They demonstrated a level of restraint that suggests extensive combat experience and a genuine commitment to minimizing harm. However, they also completely bypassed established command structures and Starfleet protocols. The contradiction is fascinating. Fascinating, Picard repeated, the word sharp. He looked at Superman, who met his gaze without flinching. Mr. Kent, you agreed to follow Commander Riker's orders. That agreement lasted approximately 4 minutes before you decided your judgment superseded his authority. People were about to die, Superman said simply. I made a choice. You made a choice that could have resulted in a diplomatic incident with the Orion Syndicate, violated half a dozen Federation statutes, and established a precedent that individual judgment trumps collective authority. Do you understand the implications? I understand that 2,000 people are alive who wouldn't be if I'd waited for your protocols to play out. Superman's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. Captain, I respect what you're trying to build here, a civilization governed by laws rather than force. But laws that prevent you from protecting the innocent aren't laws. They're excuses. Careful, Mr. Kent. Picard's tone could have frozen plasma. You're describing the Prime Directive, the foundational principle that has guided the Federation for over a century. That principle exists because we learned through bitter experience that imposing our will, even with the best intentions, creates more suffering than it prevents. Wonder Woman leaned forward. The Prime Directive applies to developing civilizations. These were Federation citizens under attack by slavers. Where's the moral complexity in defending them? The complexity lies in who gets to make that determination, Picard countered. In Federation space, Starfleet makes those decisions through a chain of command that ensures accountability, oversight, and consideration of long-term consequences. What you did today, however well-intentioned, was vigilantism. It was heroism, the Flash interjected. There's a difference. Is there? Riker spoke up from his position beside Picard. In your universe, maybe. But here, we have systems. We have regulations. We have them because the alternative is chaos, beings with power acting according to their own judgment, no matter how benevolent. Batman had been silent throughout the exchange, but now he spoke, his voice cutting through the tension. You're both right. And you're both wrong. All eyes turned to him. He stood in the shadows near the far wall, somehow making the observation lounge feel like Gotham's darkest alley. Superman and Diana acted outside your authority because your authority was moving too slowly to prevent a massacre. That's fact. But Captain Picard is also correct that what they did sets a dangerous precedent. The question isn't whether they should have acted. The question is what happens next time, and the time after that, until suddenly the Federation is relying on 7 beings to solve problems it should be solving itself. Finally, Picard said with grim satisfaction, someone who understands the larger picture. Don't mistake understanding for agreement. Batman moved into the light, and Picard saw that the cowl's white lenses were fixed on him with unsettling intensity. Your system failed today, Captain. Not because it's inherently flawed, but because it wasn't designed to handle threats that move at the speed your colonists faced. You need to adapt, or more people will die while you're following proper procedures. And your solution? Picard asked. We simply allow the Justice League to operate independently throughout Federation space, answerable to no one. No, Batman said. You integrate us into your structure, but you do it intelligently. You use us for what we're good at, immediate response to catastrophic threats. But you maintain oversight, establish clear rules of engagement, and create accountability mechanisms. Counselor Troy spoke up, her empathic senses working overtime. What Mr. Wayne is describing sounds remarkably like what you already have in your universe. You work with governments while maintaining your independence. We do, Superman acknowledged. It took years to build that trust. Years of proving we could be relied on without being controlled. Years we don't have, Picard said. Because right now, every intelligence service in the Alpha Quadrant is analyzing the same sensor data we are. The Romulans are calculating how to weaponize you. The Klingon are deciding whether you're honorable allies or dangerous rivals. And Starfleet Command, he paused, checking his console. Starfleet Command has just ordered me to secure you in the brig pending a full inquiry into the New Providence incident. The temperature in the room dropped. Superman's eyes began to glow with that eerie red luminescence. Wonder Woman's hand drifted toward her sword. The Flash vibrated slightly, ready to move. And Batman didn't move at all, which somehow felt more threatening. "Captain," Superman said carefully, "I understand you have orders. But I'm not going into a cell." "None of us are." "I could make it an order," Picard said quietly. "You could try," Wonder Woman replied. "But we both know how that would end. And I don't think you want that outcome any more than we do." Worf stood, hand on his phaser. "If you resist, you'll be confirming every fear Starfleet has about you. And if we submit," Batman said, "we'll be establishing that we can be controlled through threats and intimidation. That's not a precedent we can afford to set either." Picard looked at his senior staff, Riker's jaw set in frustration, Data processing multiple scenarios simultaneously, Troy radiating concern, Worf ready for combat he couldn't possibly win. And he looked at the Justice League, 7 beings who could tear his ship apart with their bare hands but were choosing, for now, to resolve this through dialogue. "Computer, open a secure channel to Starfleet Command. Priority 1 encryption." A moment later, Admiral Nakamura's stern face appeared on the view screen. "Captain Picard. I trust you've secured the entities as ordered." "Admiral, with respect, that would be tactically inadvisable." "Captain, those beings represent an unprecedented threat to Federation security. They bypassed our defenses, violated our protocols, and demonstrated capabilities that could destabilize the balance of power across the entire quadrant. They must be contained until we understand what we're dealing with. Admiral, they also saved 2,000 Federation citizens and neutralized a syndicate strike force with 0 casualties. Perhaps contained isn't the appropriate response to beings who've demonstrated both overwhelming power and remarkable restraint." Nakamura's eyes narrowed. "Are you refusing a direct order, Captain?" Picard took a breath, feeling the weight of what he was about to do. In his career, he'd bent regulations countless times. But openly defying Starfleet Command was different. This was the moment where principles met pragmatism, and he had to choose which mattered more. "I'm requesting a stay of execution on that order while I propose an alternative. The Justice League claims to be heroes from another universe, stranded here through no fault of their own. They've demonstrated both extraordinary capabilities and a genuine commitment to protecting life. Rather than treating them as threats to be contained, I suggest we treat them as assets to be integrated." "Integrated how, exactly?" "A provisional arrangement. They operate under Starfleet oversight for a trial period. We establish rules of engagement, reporting requirements, and accountability measures. In exchange, we give them the resources to find a way home and the freedom to use their abilities in service of Federation ideals. You're proposing we deputize 7 unknown entities with godlike powers. I'm proposing we recognize that the universe has just handed us either the greatest threat we've ever faced or the greatest allies. The choice is ours, Admiral. We can treat them as enemies and guarantee conflict, or we can extend trust and see if it's returned." Superman stood, and the simple act of him rising to his full height made the observation lounge feel smaller. "Admiral, Captain Picard is offering you something we're not obligated to accept. We could leave right now. Disappear into your galaxy and operate independently. But we don't want that. We believe in working with legitimate authorities, not against them. Give us a chance to prove we can be trusted." Nakamura studied Superman for a long moment. "And if you violate that trust? If you decide Federation laws don't apply to you? Then you'll have every right to consider us threats," Wonder Woman said. "But until that happens, perhaps you could consider us what we actually are, warriors who've sworn oaths to protect the innocent, temporarily displaced from our home, trying to do right in a universe we barely understand." The Admiral's expression softened fractionally. "Captain Picard, you're staking your career on this. You understand that?" "I do, sir." "Then you have 72 hours to establish a working framework. The Justice League operates under your direct supervision. Any incidents, any violations, any hint that they're more threat than asset, and I want them in custody or off the board entirely. Understood? Understood, Admiral. Thank you. The channel closed. Picard turned back to face the Justice League, and for the first time since they'd arrived, he allowed himself a slight smile. Congratulations. You're now provisionally attached to the USS Enterprise as special tactical consultants. Which means you follow my orders, respect my crew, and understand that the trust you've been given can be revoked in an instant. Are we clear? Superman extended his hand. Crystal clear, Captain. Thank you for taking the risk. Picard shook the offered hand, feeling the carefully controlled strength in that grip. Don't make me regret it, Mr. Kent. Now, we have 72 hours to establish rules of engagement and figure out how 7 beings from another universe integrate into Starfleet operations. Mr. Data, I want a full analysis of Justice League capabilities and potential tactical applications. Counselor Troy, I want psychological profiles. Mr. Worf, design security protocols assuming they're both allies and potential threats. Captain, Batman said, there's something else you should know. When I was analyzing your systems, I detected anomalous subspace signatures near several key Federation installations. Someone's been conducting surveillance on your most sensitive facilities. Romulan. The signature doesn't match Romulan cloaking technology. It's something else. Something that started appearing approximately 6 hours ago, right around the time we arrived in your universe. Picard and Riker exchanged glances. You're suggesting your arrival triggered a response from another faction? I'm suggesting that whatever pulled us here made a lot of noise. And something out there heard it. The comm system chirped. Bridge to Captain Picard. Sir, we're detecting a spatial anomaly forming directly ahead. It's generating the same energy signature we detected when the Justice League first arrived. Picard's blood ran cold. On screen. The view screen showed space tearing open like a wound in reality. Crackling energy discharged across the rupture, and through the breach, something massive began to emerge. A ship, but unlike any Federation vessel Picard had ever seen. Its hull was dark and angular, covered in what looked like circuit patterns that pulsed with malevolent light. Captain, Data reported, his voice tight, I am detecting technology consistent with the boom tube signatures Mr. Wayne described. Whatever came through is from the Justice League's universe. Superman rose, his entire body tensing. No. It can't be. Clark. Wonder Woman's voice was sharp. What is it? That's an Apokolips warship, Superman said, and for the first time since arriving, Picard heard fear in the Man of Steel's voice. Darkseid followed us through. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos. Picard strode from the observation lounge with the Justice League behind him, his crew already at battle stations. On the main view screen, the Apokolips warship hung against the stars like a cancerous growth, all sharp angles and malevolent geometry, its hull pulsing with energy that made the Enterprise's sensors scream warnings. Report, Picard commanded, settling into his chair. Vessel is holding position 300,000 kilometers off our bow, Worf announced, his fingers dancing across tactical. It's not transmitting any identification. Weapon systems are active, reading energy signatures I've never seen before. Multiple launch bays. Captain, that ship outguns us by a factor of at least 10 to 1. Shields up. Charge phasers but hold fire. Open hailing frequencies. Channel open, sir. Unidentified vessel, this is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise. You have entered United Federation of Planet Space. State your intentions. Silence. Superman moved toward the view screen, his cape settling around his shoulders. That's not a standard Apokolips design. It's smaller, faster. A scout vessel or advance hunter. Darkseid must have sent it through to track us down. Or to secure a beachhead, Batman added grimly. Apokolips doesn't send scouts just to observe. They send them to conquer. 30 seconds to weapons range, Worf announced. Picard's mind raced through options. Flee and lead the threat away from inhabited systems. Engage and risk a battle they couldn't win. Attempt further communication with an enemy that clearly wasn't interested in dialogue. Wonder Woman stepped forward, her armor gleaming under the bridge's lighting. Captain, let us handle this. It's our enemy. Our responsibility. Negative. This ship and crew are my responsibility. If combat is unavoidable, we face it together. 20 seconds. The viewscreen flickered, and for the first time, the Apokolips vessel responded. But not with words. An image materialized. A figure that seemed carved from living stone, eyes burning with crimson fire, armor that looked like it had been forged in the heart of a dying star. The face was brutal, implacable, radiating such raw malevolence that several bridge officers flinched. That's not Darkseid, Superman breathed, relief and concern mixing in his voice. That's one of his elite soldiers. A Parademon commander. The creature spoke, its voice a grinding rasp like continents colliding. Kryptonian. Amazonian. Mortals who dare defy Darkseid's will. You cannot hide from Apokolips. You cannot run. The universe you fled to will burn as your Earth would have burned. And when we are done, you will be brought before Darkseid in chains to witness what your cowardice has wrought. We didn't flee, Superman said, his voice hard as diamond. We were pulled here by forces beyond our control. But I'm giving you one chance, turn that ship around and leave. This universe isn't yours to threaten. The Parademon commander's laughter was like bones breaking. You speak with authority you do not possess, Kryptonian. This vessel is but the first. Behind me, a fleet prepares. Apokolips will have this universe. And Darkseid will begin with the destruction of this Enterprise. The name dripped with contempt. 10 seconds. Accept your death with what dignity you have left. The transmission cut. Evasive maneuvers. Picard commanded. All hands, brace for impact. The Enterprise heeled to port as Ensign Crusher executed a maneuver that would have made her mother proud. But the Apokolips weapons tracked them with impossible precision. Energy lanced across space, not the clean phaser fire or photon torpedoes of Federation combat, but something older, darker, that seemed to claw at reality itself. The first blast struck their shields. The Enterprise shuddered, power flickering across the bridge. Sparks erupted from the engineering console. Shields down to 67%. Worf reported. One hit, Captain. One hit. Return fire. Full spread, photon torpedoes. The Enterprise's weapons blazed. 6 torpedoes spiraled toward the Apokolips vessel, their antimatter warheads capable of vaporizing a city. The Parademon commander's ship didn't even try to dodge. The torpedoes struck, detonating in flowers of destruction that should have crippled any known vessel. When the light cleared, the warship hung undamaged, its shields, if it even had shields, completely unaffected. No damage, Data reported, confusion creeping into his synthesized voice. Captain, their defensive capabilities are. I cannot adequately describe them. Our most powerful weapons had literally no effect. That's Apokolips technology, Batman said, moving to stand beside Worf at tactical. It's not just advanced, it's fundamentally different. Your science is based on understanding and harnessing natural laws. Theirs is based on dominating and rewriting them. You can't beat them with conventional weapons. The Apokolips vessel fired again. This time 3 beams, perfectly coordinated. The Enterprise twisted through space, but one beam clipped their starboard nacelle. Alarms shrieked. Shields at 42%. Starboard nacelle showing damage to plasma injectors. Maximum speed now warp 7.6. Another hit like that and they were finished. Picard saw it in the tactical display, in the energy readings, in the calm certainty of data's analysis. The Enterprise was one of Starfleet's most advanced vessels, crewed by some of its finest officers, and they were being systematically dismantled by a single enemy ship. All hands, evacuate sections 17 through 21. Reroute power from non-essential systems to shields. Captain, Superman said quietly, you need to let us go. That ship is hunting us. It won't stop until we're captured or dead. And it will destroy everything in its path to get to us. I don't abandon guests to enemies, Picard replied. Even when those guests are bringing destruction to your doorstep. Before Picard could answer, the Flash spoke up from where he'd been vibrating with barely contained energy near the science station. Hey, guys. I've been thinking. Not now, Barry, Wonder Woman said, drawing her sword. Captain, prepare to drop shields. We're going out there. Drop shields in combat. Worf's tone suggested this was the worst tactical suggestion he'd ever heard. That would leave us completely vulnerable. For approximately 0.3 seconds, Flash continued, talking faster as his thoughts raced, which is how long it would take me to run out there, do a complete reconnaissance of that ship's hull, find its weak points, because every ship has weak points, right, and get back before they can fire again. I mean, their weapons charging cycle based on what I'm seeing is roughly 4.7 seconds, and I can move way faster than that, so really the question is whether your transporter can cycle fast enough to get Diana and Clark out there while I'm doing my thing, and then we hit them from 3 vectors simultaneously, which even super advanced space Nazi technology has to have trouble with, right? Everyone on the bridge stared at him. Did you understand any of that? Riker asked Data. Approximately 78%, sir. Mr. Allen is suggesting a coordinated assault utilizing his reconnaissance capabilities and the combat abilities of his companions. It could work, Batman said, already pulling up a schematic of the enemy vessel on the tactical display, information he shouldn't have had access to but somehow did. Their weapons have a recharge cycle. Their sensors, based on what I observed in the initial engagement, have a refresh rate of 0.6 seconds. That's an eternity for Barry. He maps the ship, finds critical systems. Diana and Clark hit those systems while the ship is between targeting solutions. And the Enterprise? Picard asked. Stays exactly where it is, shields up, looking like a wounded target. They focus on you, we dismantle them. Picard looked at his senior staff. Riker's expression was skeptical but open. Troy's empathic senses were probably screaming at her about the emotional currents swirling through the bridge. Worf looked like he desperately wanted to object but couldn't find a logical reason. Data was already running probability calculations. Captain, Data announced, running simulations based on observed capabilities of the Justice League, the proposed plan has a 47.3% chance of success. Current defensive strategy has a 6.2% chance of survival beyond the next 4 engagements. Those aren't great odds, Riker muttered. Better than what we've got, Picard replied. He turned to Superman. You understand what you're asking? The moment I drop shields, if anything goes wrong, this ship and everyone on it is vulnerable. I know. I won't let you down. Picard held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Mr. Worf, prepare to drop shields on my mark. Drop them for exactly 0.5 seconds, then bring them back up. Transporter room, lock onto Wonder Woman and Superman. Beam them directly into space on the same mark. Sir, the transporter chief's voice came back uncertain, beaming into hard vacuum. They can handle it. Trust me. The Apokolips vessel was charging weapons again, its hull pulsing with gathering energy. On the view screen, the Parademon commander's face reappeared, anticipating their destruction. Mr. Allen, Picard said, I hope you're as fast as you claim. Faster, Barry grinned. Just watch. Mark. The shields dropped. The flash became a streak of yellow lightning that shot through the viewscreen, through the actual matter of the viewscreen, his molecules vibrating at frequencies that let him pass through solid objects like they were air. He hit the hull of the Apokolips vessel in less than a second, became a blur of motion that circled the ship 3 times, 4 times, mapping every contour, every weapons port, every energy conduit. Simultaneously, Wonder Woman and Superman materialized in the void between ships. No suits, no breathing apparatus, surviving in hard vacuum through sheer physical perfection. They moved with purpose that came from years of fighting together, each knowing instinctively what the other would do. Superman hit the warship's port weapons array with both fists. The impact sent shockwaves through its hull. Wonder Woman's sword found a seam in the armor. Exactly where the flash had indicated a critical power junction lay beneath, and she drove the God-forged blade through metal that should have been impenetrable. Inside the Enterprise, Picard watched his sensors go wild. The warship's shields are fluctuating. Worf announced, something like joy in his voice. Their weapons are powering down. I'm reading massive internal damage to their propulsion systems. The Flash reappeared on the bridge, barely winded. Okay, so, bad news. That ship has backup systems for its backup systems. Good news, I shorted out approximately 67% of them. They're running on auxiliary power. But, they're also charging something big. In the center of the ship, there's this chamber with energy signatures that make your warp core look like a flashlight. A boom tube generator, Batman said grimly. They're going to open a portal. Either to escape or to bring reinforcements. On the view screen, reality began to tear. Space folded in on itself, and through the widening breach, Picard saw something that made his blood run cold. More ships. Dozens of them. An entire fleet of Apokolips warships, waiting in whatever hellish dimension they called home, preparing to pour through into Federation space. Captain. Data's voice held an urgency Picard had rarely heard. If that portal fully opens, we will be facing a force capable of overwhelming Starfleet's entire defensive perimeter. And based on their weapon capabilities, they would succeed. Picard made the decision in a heartbeat. Target the portal aperture. Maximum spread, quantum torpedoes. Fire everything we have. Sir, Superman and Wonder Woman are still out there, right in the firing solution. They can handle it. Fire. The Enterprise unleashed its full arsenal. Quantum torpedoes, weapons that tore at the fabric of space-time itself, spiraled toward the growing portal. And in the void, Superman saw them coming, understood instantly what Picard intended, and made his own impossible choice. He flew directly into the path of the torpedoes, his body becoming a shield. The quantum warheads detonated against him, their exotic matter-antimatter reactions that could shatter a planet concentrated on a single Kryptonian. The explosion was visible across the system, a miniature star birth. When the light cleared, Superman hung in space, his uniform scorched, his cape shredded, blood freezing in the vacuum from a cut across his forehead. But he was alive. And behind him, the portal was collapsing, the Apokolips fleet cut off from this universe once more. Wonder Woman caught him before he could drift, her own armor cracked but intact. Together, they returned to the Enterprise as the enemy warship, now critically damaged, its crew either dead or dying, began to break apart. In the transporter room, Superman materialized and immediately collapsed. Dr. Crusher was there in seconds, medical tricorder screaming warnings about radiation exposure, cellular damage, and trauma that would have killed any human instantly. He took quantum torpedo detonations at point-blank range, she breathed. That's impossible. Not for him, Batman said quietly. He'd materialized beside her without anyone noticing, keeping vigil over his fallen teammate. He's the strongest being in our universe. And he just proved he's willing to die for yours. On the bridge, Picard watched the debris of the Apokolips warship scatter across space. They'd won. Barely. And only because 7 beings from another universe had been willing to sacrifice themselves to stop a threat they'd inadvertently brought to his doorstep. Secure the debris field, Picard ordered. I want full analysis of that technology. And get me Starfleet Command. They need to know what just happened here. But even as he gave the orders, Picard knew the real battle had just begun. Because somewhere out there, beyond the boundaries of this universe, Darkseid had just learned that his quarry had found allies. And gods did not take kindly to those who sheltered their prey. The question was, would the Federation survive being caught between heroes and the god who hunted them? Sickbay had become a laboratory of the impossible. Dr. Beverly Crusher stood over Superman's biobed, her medical tricorder displaying readings that rewrote everything she understood about biology, physics, and the limits of life itself. Around her, 3 nurses worked with the careful precision of people handling something they didn't quite comprehend, while Batman watched from the shadows near the door like a dark guardian angel. His cellular structure is regenerating, Crusher said, speaking partly to her staff and partly to herself, the way doctors do when confronting medical mysteries. I'm watching damaged tissue repair itself at the molecular level. The radiation exposure that should have killed him in seconds, his cells are absorbing it, converting it into energy that's accelerating his healing. Superman's eyes flickered open, that eerie red glow dimming to reveal very human blue underneath. Doctor. How long was I out? 17 minutes. And you should still be unconscious for at least another hour, possibly 3 days given the trauma. She ran the tricorder over his chest where the quantum torpedoes had struck. Mr. Kent, you were at the epicenter of an explosion that generates temperatures exceeding 10 million degrees Kelvin. Your DNA should be vapor. Instead, you have what I can only describe as very severe bruising. I've had worse, Superman said, sitting up despite Crusher's protests. How's the crew? The ship? The Enterprise is intact, thanks to you. Picard's voice came from the doorway. He entered with Riker and Data, his expression unreadable. Minor damage to the starboard nacelle, shields regenerating within normal parameters. No casualties among my crew. Then it was worth it. Was it? Picard moved to stand beside the biobed. Mr. Kent, you threw yourself into a weapons barrage that could have atomized you. You gambled your life on the assumption that you could survive long enough to stop that portal. What if you'd been wrong? I wasn't. But what if you had been? What if instead of watching you walk away from quantum torpedoes, I just watched you die? Would that sacrifice have been worth it? Superman met Picard's gaze steadily. Captain, in my universe, I've made that calculation hundreds of times. Sometimes the math is simple, my life versus thousands. Sometimes it's more complicated. But I've never regretted putting myself between innocent people and danger. That's what the symbol on my chest means. He touched the scorched S emblem. Hope. The belief that someone will stand up when others can't. Even if it costs everything. A noble sentiment, Picard said quietly. And a dangerous one. Because hope without wisdom is just reckless faith. You could have died out there, Mr. Kent. And then what? We'd have faced that Apokolips fleet alone, without you, and everyone would have died anyway. Your sacrifice would have been meaningless. But I didn't die. And the fleet didn't come through. The mission succeeded. This time. Picard's voice hardened. But there will be a next time, Mr. Kent. And a time after that. Darkseid knows you're here now. That Parademon commander had time to transmit data before his ship was destroyed, Data confirmed it. Which means Apokolips is learning about Federation space, our capabilities, our weaknesses. You didn't just close one portal. You announced to a god-level tyrant that this universe exists and that you're hiding in it. The weight of that statement settled over sickbay like a suffocating blanket. Batman spoke from his corner, voice gravelly. "He's right, Clark. We knew Darkseid would follow us eventually, but we hoped for more time. Now he knows where we are, what we're facing, and that the people here aren't ready for what Apokolips can bring. Then we make them ready," Superman said, swinging his legs off the bio bed. Crusher moved to object, but the look in his eyes stopped her. "Captain, I understand your anger. We brought danger to your doorstep. But we're also the only ones who know how to fight it. Let us help you prepare." "Prepare how?" Riker asked. "You saw our weapons. They were useless against that warship. If a full Apokolips fleet comes through, we won't last 5 minutes. Not with conventional tactics," Batman agreed. He moved into the light, pulling up a holopad display that showed technical schematics of the Apokolips vessel. "But I spent those 17 minutes while Superman was unconscious analyzing the debris field. Data was kind enough to share the sensor logs." Data tilted his head with interest. "I do not recall granting you access to those files." "You didn't. I took them. We can discuss appropriate security protocols later." Batman expanded the schematic, highlighting specific systems. "Apokolips technology operates on principles you don't have in your scientific framework yet. They use something called the Source, a fundamental energy that predates your universe's physics. But their ships still need power conduits, still need structural integrity, still need crew to operate them. And every system has vulnerabilities if you know where to look." "The Flash found weak points in 4.7 seconds, Riker said. "But he had superhuman speed. Our tactical officers work at human speeds. Then we teach them to think faster." Batman's fingers danced across the holopad, pulling up Federation tactical databases that he absolutely shouldn't have access to. "Your Starfleet officers are trained for conventional warfare, ships exchanging fire at range, shields and weapons in predictable patterns. Apokolips doesn't fight like that. They overwhelm, they adapt, they exploit psychological weaknesses. You need to retrain your tactical thinking from the ground up. And who's going to do that training?" Picard asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "We are," Wonder Woman said from the doorway. She'd entered silently, her armor now repaired, or perhaps she'd simply willed the damage away, Picard couldn't be sure. Beside her stood the Flash, still vibrating slightly, and behind them came 2 figures Picard hadn't yet properly met. The first was Aquaman, looking distinctly uncomfortable in the sterile environment of sickbay. His orange and green armor seemed out of place among the Federation's aesthetic, and the trident he carried hummed with power that made the ship's structural integrity field resonate in sympathy. The second figure was Cyborg, half man and half machine in ways that made Data's positronic brain seem almost quaint by comparison. His cybernetic eye glowed blue, and Picard could see subroutines running across his visible technology interfaces. "Arthur Curry," Aquaman introduced himself with a nod that suggested both respect and caution. "And before anyone asks, yes, I can communicate with Earth-based aquatic life. No, I don't know if it works on your alien fish yet. Yes, I know we're in space and that seems like a useless power. It's not. Victor Stone," Cyborg added. "And I've been interfacing with your computer systems for the past hour. Hope you don't mind. Your AI is fascinating, by the way." He nodded toward Data. "You're positronic. That's elegant. My systems are partially organic, partially apocalyptian technology. Father Box keeps trying to establish a connection with your ship's main computer. I've been politely telling it no." "Father Box?" Data inquired with the tone of someone who just discovered a new form of sentient technology. "Long story. Involves alien gods, terrible parenting, and a near-death experience. We can compare notes later." Picard held up a hand. "Gentlemen, lady. I appreciate that you want to help. Truly. But what you're proposing is a fundamental restructuring of Starfleet tactical doctrine. That's not something I can authorize, and frankly, it's not something that can be accomplished in the time we have. How much time do we have? Batman asked. The question hung in the air. Picard glanced at Data, who ran calculations with his characteristic speed. Based on the Parademon commander's transmission duration and bandwidth, combined with the energy signatures required to maintain a stable boom tube connection across dimensional barriers, I estimate Darkseid's forces could open another portal in as little as 72 hours. However, gathering a fleet of sufficient size to overwhelm Federation defenses would require additional time. Best estimate, between 5 and 8 days before a major incursion. A week, Riker breathed. We have a week to prepare for an invasion by god-level technology we can't even scratch. Unless we scratch it differently, Flash said, zipping to the center of the room in a blur of motion that startled everyone except the Justice League. Look, I know you guys are all about regulations and proper procedures and chains of command. That's great. Super important. But right now, you've got 7 people who fought things you've never even imagined, using tactics and abilities that don't exist in your playbook. You can spend a week debating whether to trust us, or you can spend a week learning from us. Your choice. Picard looked at each member of the Justice League in turn. Superman, still recovering from injuries that would have killed any human but somehow standing and ready to fight again. Wonder Woman, ancient warrior who'd faced gods and emerged victorious. Batman, brilliant and dangerous in equal measure. The Flash, whose irreverent attitude hid a genuine desire to help. Aquaman, powerful and clearly unused to being the least impressive person in the room. And Cyborg, whose technology might be the key to understanding how to fight Apokolips on its own terms. 7 beings who'd crashed into his universe uninvited, brought a tyrant's attention with them, and then immediately risked everything to protect people they just met. Dr. Crusher, medical assessment. Is Mr. Kent fit for duty? Crusher sighed with the exasperation of a doctor whose patient was determined to ignore medical advice. By any rational standard, no. By his standards, apparently yes. His cellular regeneration is already at 87% of baseline. I hate it, for the record, but he's physically capable. Then here's what we're going to do, Picard said, feeling the weight of command settle across his shoulders. We have approximately 1 week before the next potential incursion. In that time, the Justice League will work with Starfleet Tactical to develop countermeasures against Apokolips technology. Mr. Wayne, you'll coordinate with Commander Riker and Lieutenant Worf on defensive strategies. Mr. Stone, you'll work with Mr. Data to analyze the technical specifications of Apokolips systems and see if you can find ways to adapt our weapons. Mr. Allen, you'll train our security teams in rapid response scenarios. Ms. Prince, Mr. Curry, you'll develop close-quarters combat protocols for boarding actions and hand-to-hand engagement. And me? Superman asked. Picard met his eyes. You, Mr. Kent, are going to teach my crew something that apparently isn't in Starfleet's curriculum, how to be willing to sacrifice everything for people you barely know. Because if Apokolips comes through that portal in force, that's what we're all going to need to do. Superman extended his hand. Deal. As they shook, Picard felt something shift, not just in the room, but in the fundamental dynamic between them. This wasn't just about the Justice League operating under Starfleet supervision anymore. This was partnership. Alliance. 7 heroes from another universe and 1 Federation starship, standing together against a darkness that could swallow galaxies. Captain, Data said quietly, I should inform you that during this conversation, we have been receiving priority transmissions from Starfleet Command, the Klingon High Council, and the Romulan Senate. Word of the engagement has spread. Everyone wants to know what happened. And everyone wants access to the Justice League. Of course they do, Picard muttered. Let them wait. Right now, we have work to do. Dismissed. All of you. We reconvene in 1 hour for tactical planning. And someone find out where the other members of the League ended up, we're going to need everyone for what's coming. As the group dispersed, Batman lingered near the doorway. Captain, you made the right call. Training your people, adapting to the threat. But you should know, when Darkseid comes, and he will come, it won't be about tactics or technology or clever strategies. It will be about whether you're willing to stand against a god and refuse to kneel. Some people can do that. Some can't. You'll find out which your crew is when the moment comes. Mr. Wayne, Picard said quietly, I've stared down omnipotent beings before. I've refused to submit to the Borg Collective, to Q's judgment, to every force that assumed power gave them the right to dominate others. If your Darkseid expects this crew to kneel, he's going to be very disappointed. Batman's cowl tilted in what might have been approval. Good. Because Darkseid doesn't take disappointment well. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. It always does, Mr. Wayne. It always does. Alone in sickbay with only Dr. Crusher, Picard allowed himself one moment of doubt. They were facing an enemy from another universe, with technology that defied explanation and power that made their best weapons useless. And they had 1 week to prepare. Beverly, he said quietly, tell me I'm not leading this ship into a suicide mission. She was quiet for a long moment. I can't, Jean-Luc. But I can tell you that if anyone can find a way through this, it's you. And now you've got 7 beings who specialize in the impossible helping you do it. Let's hope that's enough. Outside the viewport, stars continued their eternal dance, unaware that in 1 week, gods would wage war among them. The holodeck had become a war room, command center, and training ground all at once. Picard stood on a simulation of the Enterprise's bridge while around him, tactical scenarios played out at accelerated speed. Ships exploded, shields collapsed, and crew members died in dozens of different configurations, each one a potential future if they made the wrong choices. Run it again, Batman's voice came from somewhere in the shadows. He'd spent the last 6 days analyzing every aspect of Starfleet tactical doctrine, and his assessment had been brutally simple. They were unprepared for asymmetric warfare against an enemy that didn't follow their rules. The simulation reset. This time, 3 Apokolips warships materialized simultaneously at different vectors. The holographic Enterprise's shields went up, phasers charged, torpedoes armed. Standard defensive posture. Within 47 seconds, the ship was disabled. Again, Batman commanded. Worf stood at tactical, his frustration evident in every rigid line of his posture. We have run this simulation 63 times. The outcome is always the same. We cannot win against superior firepower using conventional tactics. Then stop using conventional tactics. Wonder Woman stepped into the light, her armor gleaming under the holodeck's lighting. Lieutenant, in your military training, what did they teach you about facing impossible odds? To find an advantage, exploit enemy weaknesses, and fight with honor. Honor. Diana's expression was thoughtful. A warrior's code. I respect that. But sometimes honor means adapting, not adhering to traditions that will get your people killed. Show me your best warrior's instinct. Forget your training protocols. How would a Klingon warrior handle 3 ships that outgun him? Worf's eyes narrowed. A Klingon would not wait to be attacked. He would strike first, strike hard, and make the enemy taste blood before they could organize their assault. Then do that. The simulation reset. This time, Worf didn't follow standard defensive protocols. The moment the Apokolips ships appeared, he launched every torpedo the Enterprise had in a concentrated barrage at the nearest vessel, then immediately executed a hard turn that brought them within knife-fighting range of the second ship. Point-blank phaser fire at maximum intensity. The third ship tried to lock weapons, but Worf had already put the first ship between them and the Enterprise, using it as a shield. The Enterprise still died, but it took 2 of the enemy ships with it and lasted 3 minutes instead of 47 seconds. Better, Batman said. You're thinking like a predator instead of prey. But you're still telegraphing your moves. Your attack pattern is too predictable. Against Apokolips tactics, predictability is death. Then how do we become unpredictable? Riker asked. He'd been watching from the captain's chair, learning Batman's teaching methods. They have superior sensors, faster weapons, and tactical AI that adapts to our strategies. You do what Barry does. The Flash materialized in the center of the holodeck, having run through 17 decks in the time it took Riker to finish his question. You move faster than they can process. Not physically, your ships can't do that, but cognitively. Make decisions so quickly, so instinctively, that their AI can't predict the pattern because there isn't one. Data looked up from his console where he'd been analyzing combat data with Cyborg. Mr. Allen, you are describing intuitive combat, decision-making that bypasses conscious analytical processes. However, Starfleet officers are trained specifically to avoid intuition in favor of reasoned tactical assessment. And that's why you keep dying in these simulations, Cyborg said, his cybernetic eye glowing as it interfaced with the holodeck systems. Look, I get it. Systematic analysis, risk assessment, following procedures, that works great against enemies who fight the same way. But Apokolips doesn't think like you. Their tactical doctrine is about overwhelming force applied with brutal efficiency. You need to be chaos to their order. Chaos is antithetical to Starfleet principles, Picard said quietly from his position observing the training. We succeed through discipline, coordination, and adherence to proven strategies. And when those strategies stop working? Superman had been silent throughout the session, but now he floated down from where he'd been observing from above, literally floating, defying gravity in a way that still made Picard's scientifically trained mind rebel. Captain, I've fought for years alongside the most brilliant tactical minds in my universe. Batman plans for every contingency. Wonder Woman has millennia of combat experience. But sometimes, in the moment when everything's falling apart, you can't plan. You can't calculate. You just have to trust yourself and act. That's not courage, Mr. Kent. That's recklessness. Sometimes they're the same thing. And sometimes recklessness is what saves lives when caution would let them die. Picard met Superman's gaze, and in those alien blue eyes saw something that troubled him, absolute conviction. This wasn't arrogance. It was the certainty of someone who'd made impossible choices and lived with the consequences. Superman had thrown himself into quantum torpedoes because he knew, not hoped, not calculated, but knew, he could survive. That kind of certainty was either wisdom or delusion, and Picard wasn't sure which. Captain, Data interrupted, I have completed my analysis of the Apokolips debris field in conjunction with Mr. Stone. We have identified a potential vulnerability in their shield harmonics. Cyborg pulled up a holographic display showing complex waveform patterns. Their shields operate on a frequency that phases in and out of normal spacetime. It's what makes them nearly impenetrable. Your weapons hit them when they're phased out, so the energy disperses into subspace. But there's a 0.003 second window when they cycle back to normal space to recalibrate. If you can hit them in that window with enough concentrated force, we might penetrate their defenses, Data completed. However, targeting that window would require sensor precision and firing synchronization beyond standard Starfleet capabilities. The margin of error is functionally zero. Not for me, Flash said, grinning. I can track frequencies that fast. Just give me access to your weapon systems and I'll time the shots. Worf looked horrified. Absolutely not. Weapons control is going to get you killed if you don't adapt, Batman finished. Lieutenant, your pride in your systems is admirable. But pride doesn't win wars. Results do. If Mr. Allen can give you the targeting solution you need, why does it matter how he does it? Because it violates every protocol. Protocols. Wonder Woman's voice was soft, but it cut through the argument like her sword through shields. I have watched civilizations rise and fall. I have seen great empires collapse because they value tradition over survival. Lieutenant Worf, you are a warrior. I recognize that in you. But even the greatest warrior must know when to set aside the old ways and embrace new ones. The Klingon security chief looked between Wonder Woman and Picard, clearly torn between his training and the brutal logic being presented to him. Finally, he spoke, his voice heavy with reluctant acceptance. If we are to survive, we must be willing to change. Very well. Mr. Allen may coordinate weapons targeting. Excellent. Barry vibrated with enthusiasm. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Data, can you route tactical sensors through that console there? And Worf, I'll need direct neural interface with your phaser control systems. Cyborg, can you rig something up that won't fry my brain when I jack into their computers? Already on it, Cyborg said, pulling components from his arm that unfolded into what looked like Federation technology but moved with alien fluidity. Fair warning, this is going to feel weird. My tech is partially organic. It'll interface with your speed-force connection in ways that might be intense. As the two of them worked, Picard moved to stand beside Batman in the shadows. Mr. Wayne, what you're doing here, changing how my officers think, undermining their training, you understand this could backfire catastrophically? It could, Batman agreed. But you know what will definitely backfire? Facing Apokolips with tactics designed for opponents who fight fair. Darkseid doesn't fight fair. He fights to win, using every advantage, exploiting every weakness. And right now, your biggest weakness is that you're too structured, too predictable, too bound by rules that your enemy doesn't follow. Structure and rules are what separate us from chaos. No. Discipline and judgment separate you from chaos. Rules are just tools. And when the tools don't work anymore, you need new ones. Batman turned to face him fully, the white lenses of his cowl reflecting the holodeck's light. Captain, I've spent years fighting gods, monsters, and alien invasions. I've watched civilizations burn because they couldn't adapt fast enough. The Federation is impressive, vast, organized, built on noble principles. But it's also fragile. One significant shock to the system and the whole thing could fracture. Apokolips is that shock. So you have a choice, adapt now while you still can, or stay rigid and watch everything you've built shatter. The figure was massive, easily 3 meters tall, with skin like cracked stone and eyes that burned with crimson fire. But it was the expression that chilled Picard's blood, absolute contempt, mixed with the patience of something that had conquered 1,000 worlds and would conquer 1,000 more. I am Kalibak, the figure spoke, voice like grinding boulders. First son of Darkseid, commander of his armies, and the hand that will crush this pitiful resistance. Kryptonian, Amazonian, mortals who shelter them, you have 5 minutes to surrender the Justice League or watch your worlds burn. Darkseid has spoken. His will shall be done. The transmission cut before Superman could respond. 5 minutes, Riker said quietly. Not much time for a decision. There's no decision to make, Picard replied. We don't surrender guests to enemies. Mr. Worf, battle stations. All hands prepare for combat. And someone tell me we have a plan, because we're about to face 43 warships with technology that makes ours look like children's toys. Superman moved to stand beside the captain's chair. Captain, let me go out there. Let me face Kalibak directly. Maybe I can. No, Picard's voice was iron. You tried the hero's sacrifice once already, Mr. Kent. This time, we fight together or not at all. Mr. Data, position of the fleet. They are forming a standard Apokolips siege configuration. Sphere formation with the flagship at the center. We are completely surrounded. Then we use that against them. Batman was already at tactical with Worf, pulling up schematics. A sphere formation assumes the target will try to break through at the weakest point. They're prepared for that. So we don't break through. We implode them. Explain, Picard demanded. Flash gets us our targeting solution on the flagship. Superman and Wonder Woman draw fire and keep their attention divided. Aquaman, you've been quiet, but I've read your capabilities. You can manipulate water pressure differentials. These ships have crews. Crews need atmosphere. Find their life support systems and flood them. Cyborg, you interface with their communications and create chaos in their command structure. Green Lantern is still 3 light-years away with the others who were scattered, Superman interjected. John said he'd be here in 30 minutes, but that might be 30 minutes too late. Then we work with what we have. Captain, your ship is the anvil. We're the hammer. You keep their attention, we break their formation. When the flagship falls, the rest will scatter or retreat. It's how Apokolips operates: kill the commander, break the chain of command. Mr. Wayne, that's the most reckless tactical plan I've ever heard. It's also the only one that has a chance of working. Sir. Picard looked at his crew. Riker, steady as always. Worf, eager for battle but clearly uncertain about their chances. Data, processing countless scenarios and probably concluding they were all going to die. Troy, her empathic senses likely overwhelmed by the emotional currents on the bridge. And he looked at the Justice League. 7 beings who'd faced gods before and somehow lived. 7 beings who were asking him to trust them one more time. Make it so, Picard said quietly. Mr. Worf, prepare to execute Mr. Wayne's plan. All hands, this is the captain. We are facing an enemy unlike any the Federation has encountered. But we do not face them alone. Today, we fight alongside heroes from another universe. Today, we show Apokolips what it means to stand against tyranny. Today, we show Darkseid that this universe will not kneel. All hands to battle stations. Engage. The Enterprise surged forward, and around it, the Justice League deployed into the void. Superman and Wonder Woman streaked toward the fleet like living missiles. Flash became a blur of yellow lightning that moved between ships too fast for sensors to track. Aquaman's trident glowed with power that reached out to find moisture in enemy hulls. Cyborg systems interfaced with Apokolips communications, seeding confusion and conflicting orders. And Batman stood at tactical beside Worf, coordinating the chaos into something that looked almost like strategy. The first phaser blast from the Enterprise struck an Apokolips destroyer exactly .003 seconds after its shield cycled. The beam punched through armor that should have been impenetrable and cored the ship like an apple. Explosions rippled along its hull. Direct hit. Worf announced with savage satisfaction. Shields penetrated. Enemy vessel disabled. 42 to go, Batman said calmly. Keep firing. The battle for Federation space had begun. And somewhere beyond the dimensions, Darkseid watched his son wage war, waiting to see if this universe was worthy of his personal attention. Space became a canvas of violence painted in phaser fire and explosions. The Enterprise wove through the Apokolips fleet like a dancer among predators, shields flaring with each near miss, hull groaning under stress that would have torn lesser vessels apart. On the bridge, Picard gripped his armrest as the ship executed maneuvers that pushed inertial dampeners to their limits. Shield status, he called over the din of alarms. Holding at 43%, Worf reported, his fingers never stopping their dance across tactical. Flash's targeting solutions are working, we've disabled 7 enemy vessels. But Captain, we cannot maintain this pace. Their weapons are adapting to our firing patterns. Then we change the patterns. Batman's voice was calm despite the chaos erupting around them. Data, can you route helm control through the navigation deflector array? That is not standard procedure. Can you do it? Yes, but the power drain would reduce shield strength by an additional 15%. Do it anyway. Ensign Crusher, when Data gives you control, I want you to fly this ship like you're in an atmosphere, not vacuum. Use the flagship's mass shadow as gravitational cover. Make them think three-dimensionally while you're thinking four-dimensionally. Wesley Crusher's hands trembled slightly as he reconfigured his console, but his voice was steady. Aye, sir. Ready for unconventional flight patterns. The Enterprise dove, there was no other word for it, straight down relative to the fleet's orientation, then spiraled around the flagship's massive hull so closely that Picard could see individual hull plates on the view screen. Apokolips weapons fire meant for them struck their own ships instead. 3 destroyers took friendly fire and broke formation. Outside the ship, the Justice League fought with a coordination born from years of battlefield experience. Superman took point, drawing fire from a dozen vessels simultaneously. Energy beams that could vaporize starships struck his body and dispersed harmlessly. He wasn't invulnerable. Picard could see scorch marks appearing on his uniform, blood seeping from a gash across his cheek, but he was close enough that it made no tactical difference. Wonder Woman moved between the ships like an avenging angel, her sword trailing arcs of golden light. Each strike found critical systems, weapons arrays shattered, sensor clusters exploded, engine manifolds ruptured with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. She fought with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent 3,000 years perfecting the art of war. Captain. Troy's voice cut through the bridge noise, urgent with empathic warning. I'm sensing something massive approaching. A consciousness that feels ancient and utterly malevolent. Oh God, it's Kalibak. He's decided to join the battle personally. On the view screen, a portion of the flagship's hull split open. From within emerged a figure in armor that looked like it had been forged from the heart of a dying star, wielding a weapon, Beta Club. Superman would later identify it, that crackled with energy that made space-time itself recoil. Kalibak was easily 3 times Superman's size, a mountain of muscle and rage given form. Kryptonian. Kalibak's voice boomed across open comms. I am the firstborn of Darkseid. I have crushed heroes from 1,000 worlds. Face me, or watch as I tear your allies' ship apart with my bare hands. Superman's response was to fly directly at Kalibak with speed that made the sensors struggle to track him. The impact when they collided sent shockwaves rippling through space visible to the naked eye. They grappled in the void, trading blows that would have shattered planets, each impact generating energy signatures that lit up every tactical display on the bridge. The flagship is moving. Data announced. Kalibak's absence from command has created a tactical gap. Multiple Apokolips vessels are maneuvering independently without coordinated strategy. Press the advantage, Picard ordered. Target their command ship. All weapons, full spread. The Enterprise unleashed everything. Phasers, quantum torpedoes, photon torpedoes, timed perfectly with Flash's calculations to strike during shield vulnerabilities. The flagship's massive hull buckled under the assault, armor plating vaporizing, internal explosions blooming like flowers of destruction. But it wasn't enough. The ship was too large, too well-armored, designed to withstand planetary bombardment. And now its weapons were targeting the Enterprise with the kind of focused malevolence that suggested someone aboard had decided to make Picard's ship a priority target. Incoming fire. Worf shouted. Brace for impact. The bridge erupted in sparks and smoke as energy beams struck their shields with force that made the previous attack seem like practice rounds. The ship bucked violently. Console explosions sent 3 officers tumbling. Emergency force fields slammed into place across hull breaches. And still the Apokolips flagship poured fire into them with relentless, mechanical precision. Shields at 12%. Worf reported through gritted teeth. Hull breaches on deck 7, 12, and 15. We cannot survive another salvo. Then we make sure there isn't another salvo, Batman said. He tapped his comm badge. He'd somehow acquired one despite never being officially issued it. Aquaman, I need you at the flagship starboard ventral section, coordinates I'm transmitting now. There's a coolant exchange system that feeds their main reactor. Can you reach it? Aquaman's voice came back, slightly distorted by whatever interface Cyborg had rigged. I'm 200 meters away. What do you need? Their coolant system uses a liquid metallic compound that responds to pressure manipulation. If you can force it to flow backward through the system, it'll flood their reactor chamber and cause a cascading failure. On it. Arthur Curry, king of Atlantis, thrust his trident into the hull of a ship that outmassed his entire kingdom and called to the exotic fluids within. The trident glowed with power that transcended simple technology. This was elemental control, the authority of ancient gods channeled through a weapon forged before human civilization existed. Inside the flagship, coolant systems began flowing in directions they were never designed for. Alarms screamed. Engineers scrambled to shut down conduits. But Aquaman was relentless, his will imposing order on chaos, forcing thousands of tons of superheated metallic fluid to obey laws older than Apokolips itself. The flagship's reactor started to destabilize. We're reading massive energy fluctuations in their power core, data reported. At current rate of cascade, the flagship will suffer critical containment failure in 47 seconds. All ships, emergency retreat. Picard commanded. Put maximum distance between us and that flagship. But Superman was still out there, locked in combat with Kalibak. The two titans traded blows that sent shockwaves across the battlefield, neither giving ground, neither showing mercy. Superman's speed against Kalibak's raw power. Kryptonian might against Apokolips' brutality. Clark. Wonder Woman's voice cut across comms. The flagship is going critical. You need to disengage. He won't, Batman said quietly, watching the fight on tactical displays. He knows if Kalibak escapes, this fleet regroups. He's going to try to end this here. He'll die, Picard said. Probably. But he'll consider it worth the cost. Something in Picard snapped, not anger, exactly, but a fundamental rejection of the calculus being presented. He'd spent 6 days watching the Justice League prepare his crew for war, had witnessed their competence and courage, had begun to understand what they represented. And he refused to accept that heroism required death. Mr. Data, can we beam Superman aboard before the flagship explodes? Negative, Captain. Transporter range is insufficient, and the energy interference from the battle would make lock impossible. Then we get into range. Ensign Crusher, plot a course directly toward the flagship. Maximum impulse. Sir. Riker stood from his chair. That ship is about to explode with the force of a small star. If we're that close when it happens, then we'd better have very good shields and a very fast pilot. Ensign, execute. The Enterprise turned, accelerating toward the dying flagship even as every tactical instinct screamed this was suicide. The Apokolips fleet seemed confused by the maneuver. Why would their enemy fly toward certain death? Captain, Worf said, something almost like admiration in his voice, you are insane. I've been told that before, Mr. Worf. Usually right before I do something that works. Transporter room, lock onto Superman the moment we're in range. Beam him directly to sickbay. I suspect Dr. Crusher will have opinions about his condition. 20 seconds to critical failure, Data announced. 18. 17. Superman drove his fist into Kalibak's chest with force that would have pulverized a mountain. The son of Darkseid roared in pain and rage, bringing his Beta Club down in a strike meant to split atoms. Superman caught the weapon mid-swing, and for a moment, the two were locked in a test of pure strength, Kryptonian against new god. 10 seconds. Wonder Woman saw what was happening and made her choice. She flew at Kalibak from behind, her sword finding the gap between his helmet and chest plate. The god-forged blade bit deep, drawing ichor that burned like acid. Kalibak screamed, loosening his grip just enough for Superman to tear the Beta Club from his hands and drive it like a spear through the war god's abdomen. 5 seconds. 4. Transporter lock achieved. The transporter chief's voice came through, triumphant and terrified. Energizing. Superman and Wonder Woman dissolved into quantum flux and rematerialized aboard the Enterprise. The ship was already turning, engines screaming as they put distance between themselves and the flagship. 3. 2. 1. The Apokolips flagship exploded with a fury that momentarily outshone the system's star. The shockwave caught the Enterprise, sent it tumbling through space, overloaded every system simultaneously. Main power failed. Auxiliary power failed. Emergency batteries kicked in to provide minimal life support as the ship spun through the void, systems dark, crew unconscious at their stations. When Picard opened his eyes, he didn't remember closing them. The bridge was lit only by emergency lighting. His head throbbed where he'd struck it against something. Blood ran down his face from a cut above his eye. Around him, his crew was stirring, groaning, checking for injuries. "Report," he managed, his voice hoarse. Data pulled himself back to his console, his uniform torn but his positronic brain undamaged. Main power offline. Warp drive offline. Shields offline. "We are adrift, Captain. However, we are alive. Scanning for enemy vessels." A long pause. "Captain, the Apokolips fleet is retreating. 31 vessels remaining out of the original 43. They are forming up and opening boom tubes. They are leaving. On the view screen, operating on emergency power." Picard watched the surviving warships flee through dimensional portals. Without their flagship, without Kalibak, without coordination, they were abandoning the battle. "We won," Riker said, disbelief evident in his voice. "By all the laws of physics and tactical common sense, we should be dead. But we won." "Not we," Picard said quietly. "They won. The Justice League won. We simply survived long enough for them to do it." Batman appeared on the bridge. Picard had stopped questioning how he moved through the ship unseen, looking no worse for wear despite the battle they just survived. "Captain, you should know, Kalibak isn't dead. Wounded badly, yes. But new gods don't die easily. He'll return to Apokolips, report to Darkseid, and they'll come back with a bigger fleet and better strategy. This was just the opening move. Then we'll be ready for the next one. Will you? Because from where I'm standing, you just survived through a combination of luck, improvisation, and the fact that Superman was willing to fight a god to a standstill. Next time, Darkseid might come personally. And if he does, everything you saw today will look like a skirmish." Picard met Batman's hidden gaze and saw not fear, but grim acceptance. This was a man who'd stared into the abyss so many times that darkness no longer intimidated him. "Then we have work to do, Mr. Wayne. Work to prepare for a threat that until a week ago, we didn't know existed. Work to adapt our entire civilization to the reality that the universe is more dangerous than we ever imagined." He stood, straightening his torn uniform with that unconscious gesture of command. "But first, we get my ship operational again. And we make sure Superman and Wonder Woman survived their battle." In sickbay, Dr. Crusher was indeed having opinions, loudly, about Superman's condition. He'd taken hits from a weapon designed to kill gods, fought through energy levels that should have reduced him to constituent atoms, and survived the explosion of a vessel whose detonation had been visible from 3 star systems away. He had a concussion, 17 cracked ribs, and extensive tissue damage across 40% of his body. He was already healing. Already sitting up. Already asking when he could return to duty. "You are not returning to anything," Crusher said firmly, her tricorder reading impossible recovery rates. "You are staying in this biobed for at least 12 hours while your body does whatever alien magic it does to repair itself. Doctor, if Darkseid sends another fleet, then we'll face it. But right now, Mr. Kent, you need rest. That's not a suggestion. That's a medical order, and on this ship, medical orders outrank captain's orders when it comes to patient welfare. Superman looked past her to Picard, who'd entered sickbay with the Justice League. The Kryptonian's expression was apologetic. Captain, I'm sorry. I should have disengaged when you ordered. I put your ship at risk to finish the fight. You put my ship at risk, Picard agreed. And you saved countless lives by ensuring Kalibak couldn't regroup his fleet for another assault. I'm torn between commending you and confining you to quarters for insubordination. Since you're already confined to sickbay, I'll settle for saying this: next time you decide to fight a god to the death, at least warn me first so I can plan the rescue operation accordingly. Superman's laugh turned into a wince as his cracked ribs reminded him they existed. Deal. Captain. Worf's voice came through the comm, urgent. Sensors are detecting another boom tube signature forming. Single vessel, approaching at high velocity. It's transmitting a Klingon identification code. On screen. The view screen showed a Klingon bird of prey decloaking near the debris field, and on it came a transmission that made Picard's stomach drop. Not because of who it was, Ambassador Worf's father, Captain Ken, but because behind the Klingon vessel, 3 more portals were opening. Romulan warbuds. Emerging from cloaked positions they'd clearly held throughout the entire battle, watching, analyzing, learning. Captain Picard, the lead Romulan commander's face appeared on screen, her expression unreadable. We observed your battle with great interest. These beings from another universe, these Justice League, they are formidable indeed. The Romulan Star Empire would very much like to discuss the terms of their extradition to Romulan space for further study. And Picard realized that the battle they just survived was nothing compared to the diplomatic war that was about to begin. Because now everyone knew the Justice League existed. Everyone knew what they could do. And everyone wanted them. The Federation, the Klingon, the Romulans, they were about to fight over 7 beings who just wanted to go home. And in the shadows between dimensions, Darkseid watched it all unfold, patient as entropy, waiting for the moment when this universe would tear itself apart over the very heroes trying to save it. The real war was just beginning. The conference room adjacent to the bridge had become a pressure cooker of interstellar diplomacy. Picard sat at the head of the table, flanked by Riker and Troy, facing representatives from 3 major powers who'd arrived within hours of the battle's conclusion. The air was thick with tension that Troy's empathic senses could practically taste. Commander Tomalak of the Romulan Star Empire sat with the casual arrogance of someone who believed he held all the tactical advantages. His hands were folded on the table, but his eyes missed nothing, cataloging every detail of the Justice League members present, calculating their worth, planning their capture. Across from him, Ambassador Kmpek represented the Klingon High Council. The old warrior's face was scarred from decades of combat, and he watched the proceedings with barely concealed impatience. Klingon had little tolerance for diplomatic niceties when matters of honor and power were at stake. And standing near the viewport, arms crossed in bureaucratic disapproval, was Admiral Nechayev from Starfleet Command. Her presence meant the Federation brass had decided this situation required direct oversight. That she'd arrived personally, rather than simply sending orders, told Picard exactly how seriously they were taking the Justice League's existence. Superman stood against the far wall with Wonder Woman, both still showing signs of their battle with Kalibak. Batman lurked in shadows. Of course, while Flash vibrated slightly beside Data, who'd been invited to observe and record. Cyborg had interfaced with the room's systems, his cybernetic eye glowing as he monitored multiple data streams simultaneously. Aquaman leaned against the wall with his trident, looking profoundly uncomfortable with diplomatic proceedings. Let me be clear, Admiral Nechayev began, her voice carrying command authority honed over decades. The Federation Council has reviewed your actions during the Apokolips incursion. While your intervention undoubtedly saved lives, you also exposed Federation space to a threat from another dimension, engaged in combat without proper authorization, and demonstrated capabilities that fundamentally alter the balance of power in the Alpha Quadrant. We saved your colony, Superman said quietly. We stopped a fleet that would have rolled through Federation space like it wasn't there. And we did it while your regulations would have had us sitting on our hands watching people die. Your intentions are not in question, Mr. Kent. The consequences are. Nechayev pulled up a holographic display showing tactical data. In the 72 hours since the battle, we've detected increased military activity from both the Klingon Empire and Romulan Star Empire. Intelligence suggests they're repositioning fleets, not because of the Apokolips threat, but because of you. They see 7 individuals who can match the firepower of entire armadas, and they're terrified of what happens if those individuals align with their enemies. Then perhaps, Tomalak interjected smoothly, the solution is obvious. The Justice League should be placed under neutral custody, Romulan custody, to ensure they cannot be weaponized by any single power. We would treat them with the respect their capabilities demand, study their abilities to better prepare all civilizations for future dimensional incursions, and guarantee they pose no threat to galactic stability. Study them? Wonder Woman's voice was ice. You mean imprison them? Dissect their powers? Use them as weapons or breeding stock to create soldiers with our abilities? I've seen civilizations try this before, Commander. It never ends well for anyone involved. Your objection is noted, Tomalak said with false courtesy. But you must understand the Romulan position. 7 beings with your capabilities, allied with the Federation, would give Starfleet an unacceptable strategic advantage. The Senate cannot permit such an imbalance. The Senate can go to, Flash started, but Batman's hand on his shoulder stopped him. What the Flash means, Batman said, stepping forward into the light, is that we're not weapons to be stockpiled or bargaining chips to be traded. We're people. People who want to go home. And until we can find a way back to our universe, we'll continue doing what we've always done, protecting innocent lives from those who would harm them. A noble sentiment, K'mpek rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. But nobility does not address political reality. The Klingon Empire respects strength. We have seen your strength. We would welcome warriors of your caliber as honored allies in our wars. Join us, fight alongside the Empire, and earn glory that will echo through the ages. We're not mercenaries, Superman replied. And we don't fight for glory. We fight to protect people who can't protect themselves. Then you are fools, K'mpek said flatly. Power without purpose is wasted. Glory without recognition is meaningless. The Federation has made you soft with their talk of ethics and restraint. Among Klingon, you would be celebrated as the warriors you are. Among Klingon, Wonder Woman said, we would be expected to fight their wars, conquer their enemies, and abandon the principles that define us. I am a warrior, Ambassador. I have been a warrior for 3,000 years. But I am not a conqueror. There's a difference. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. K'mpek's hand moved toward his DK Tog knife, an unconscious gesture, but one that made Worf tense at his position by the door. Perhaps, Admiral Nechayev said, cutting through the building hostility, we should focus on the immediate problem. Captain Picard's report indicates that Darkseid, the entity leading Apokolips, is likely to return with greater force. Whether we like it or not, all our civilizations are now potential targets. The question is, how do we prepare? By securing the Justice League's cooperation, Tomalak said. Willingly or otherwise. Batman laughed, a sound like broken glass grinding together. Commander, I've analyzed Romulan military capabilities. Your best warbuds, your elite Tal Shir operatives, your most advanced technology, none of it would be sufficient to capture us against our will. You could try. Many have. But I promise you, the cost would exceed any potential benefit. Is that a threat? It's a mathematical assessment. But if it makes you feel better to interpret it as a threat, go ahead. Gentlemen, Picard interjected, his voice carrying the weight of command that had silenced admirals and ambassadors alike, this posturing is accomplishing nothing. We face a common threat. Darkseid has demonstrated interest in our dimension. The Apokolips fleet that attacked was merely a scouting force, their equivalent of a probe. When they return in force, it won't be just Federation space at risk. The Romulan Star Empire, the Klingon Empire, every civilization in the Alpha Quadrant will be targets. All the more reason, Nechayev said, to ensure the Justice League's capabilities are available to defend all our peoples, not just those who happen to be in the Federation. We're already available, Superman said, frustration creeping into his voice. That's what we're trying to tell you. We don't need to be captured, studied, or controlled. We just need to be trusted to do what we do best. Trust. Tomalak savored the word like wine. Trust is earned through transparency, Mr. Kent. Yet you and your companions remain enigmas. We know nothing of your true capabilities, your limitations, your loyalties. How can we trust what we don't understand? You can start, Counselor Troy said quietly, speaking for the first time, by recognizing that trust is a two-way street. The Justice League has demonstrated nothing but good faith since arriving. They've saved Federation citizens, fought alongside Starfleet, and asked for nothing in return. Perhaps the question isn't whether we can trust them, but whether they can trust us not to treat them as commodities. Silence fell over the room. Picard saw calculation in every face, weighing the counselor's words against political necessity, personal ambition, and strategic advantage. The comm system chirped, breaking the tension. Bridge to Captain Picard. Sir, we're detecting spatial anomalies forming throughout the sector. Multiple boom tube signatures, but these are different from the Apokolips portals. The energy patterns are organic. Sir, something's coming through, and it's big. Picard stood. On screen. The view screen activated, showing space outside the ship. And there, forming like wounds in reality, were portals unlike anything they'd seen before. Not the mechanical precision of boom tubes, but flowing, living apertures that pulsed with emerald light. Through the largest portal emerged a figure that made even Superman straighten with recognition. A man, if such a being could be called merely a man, wearing a green and black uniform, surrounded by an aura of willpower made manifest. A power ring on his finger blazed with light that seemed to challenge the darkness of space itself. John. Superman's relief was palpable. You made it. Barely, the newcomer, Green Lantern, responded through the comm channel. I've been tracking dimensional distortions across 3 light-years, following the trail you all left when you arrived. But Clark, we've got a problem. When I was mapping the rift between our universe and yours, I detected something following me. Something that's been using our energy signatures to map a path to this dimension. Specify, Picard commanded. Green Lantern's expression was grim. Darkseid isn't coming with just a fleet. He's bringing Apokolips itself. The entire planet. His throne world, his armies, his most powerful lieutenants, everything. He's decided your universe is going to be his next conquest, and he's personally overseeing the invasion. The room erupted into chaos. Nechayev was on her comm immediately, relaying information to Starfleet Command. Kompek roared challenges in Klingon that needed no translation. Tomalak's expression cycled through shock, calculation, and cold strategic assessment in seconds. But Picard watched the Justice League, and what he saw there troubled him more than the news itself. They weren't surprised. They weren't panicking. They were preparing, with the grim determination of people who'd always known this moment would come. How long? Batman asked. Green Lantern consulted his ring. The rift is stabilizing. At current rate of dimensional convergence, Apokolips will be able to transition fully into this universe in approximately 36 hours. When it does, you're looking at a planet weaponized beyond anything your civilizations have encountered. Darkseid commands armies in the billions. His elite forces, the female Furies, his parade mon shock troops, his new god lieutenants, they make Kalibak look like a warm-up act. Then we evacuate, Nechayev said immediately. Pull all Federation assets back to core systems, establish defensive perimeters, prepare for siege warfare on a scale we've never. That won't work, Wonder Woman interrupted. Apokolips doesn't siege. It overwhelms. You retreat, you're just choosing the ground where you'll die. The only chance is to hit them before they're fully entrenched in your dimension. Strike while they're still vulnerable during the transition. Strike Apokolips. Tomalak's laugh was harsh. You're suggesting we attack an entire planet? I'm suggesting we don't have a choice. Once Darkseid establishes a foothold in this universe, he won't stop until he's subjugated every world, every civilization, every living being. That's not speculation. That's his nature. He is tyranny made manifest, and he will not negotiate, will not compromise, will not stop. Kmpek stood, his decision made. Then we fight. The Klingon Empire will not cower before any enemy, regardless of their power. We will meet this Darkseid in battle and show him what it means to face warriors who embrace death with honor. The Romulan Star Empire, Tomalak said slowly, does not make such decisions lightly. But if what you say is true, if this threat is as existential as you claim, then perhaps old rivalries must be set aside. Temporarily. All eyes turned to Admiral Nechayev. Picard watched her face cycle through expressions that reflected the impossible weight of the decision before her. She was being asked to commit the Federation to a war against an enemy from another dimension, alongside allies they'd been preparing to fight for decades, based on the word of 7 beings who'd appeared in their universe less than 2 weeks ago. I need to consult with the Federation Council, she said finally. But Captain Picard, you're authorized to begin preliminary tactical planning. If we're going to do this, and I emphasize if, we'll need every advantage, every strategy, every resource we can muster. That includes the Justice League's expertise. Superman stepped forward. Admiral, you're talking about an alliance between civilizations that have been enemies for generations. That's going to take time you don't have. But there's something else you should know. We've fought Darkseid before. Multiple times. We've lost more than we've won. But we've learned his tactics, his psychology, his weaknesses. If you're serious about stopping him, you'll need to do something your civilizations have never done before. What's that? You'll need to put 7 strangers in command of your combined fleets and trust that we know what we're doing. Because the traditional chains of command, the political considerations, the diplomatic protocols, none of that will matter when Apokolips arrives. The only thing that will matter is whether you're willing to follow people who've actually survived fighting a god. The silence that followed was absolute. Picard saw the calculation in everyone's eyes, pride warring with pragmatism, tradition struggling against survival instinct. Captain Picard, Nechayev said quietly, your assessment. Can they do what they're claiming? Picard thought about the past week. Watching Superman throw himself into quantum torpedoes. Wonder Woman fighting with the skill of someone who'd perfected warfare before human civilization existed. Batman's tactical genius that had kept them alive against impossible odds. Flash's speed that had made the difference between victory and annihilation. The Green Lantern's power that even now held reality together against the strain of dimensional convergence. Admiral, I don't know if they can win. But I know we can't win without them. I've seen what they're capable of. More importantly, I've seen what they're willing to sacrifice. If we're going to face Darkseid, we need heroes. And heroes are exactly what they are. Nechayev closed her eyes for a long moment, and when she opened them, Picard saw a decision that would echo through Federation history. Very well. Provisional command authority is granted to the Justice League for the duration of this crisis. Captain Picard, you'll serve as liaison between them and the combined fleet. All three powers, Federation, Klingon, Romulan, will contribute forces to a unified command structure. This is madness, Tomalak said, but his protest lacked conviction. This is survival, Peck countered. And if we must follow alien warriors to achieve it, then we will. But know this. He addressed the Justice League directly: if you fail, if you lead our forces to destruction, the Klingon Empire will remember. And we will have vengeance. We don't plan to fail, Superman said quietly. We never do. But Ambassador, you should know something. Darkseid doesn't just threaten your lives. He threatens your freedom, your individuality, your right to choose your own destiny. He will not kill you quickly. He will remake you into extensions of his will. And that fate is worse than any death. Wonder Woman drew her sword, the blade singing with divine resonance. 36 hours until Apokolips arrives. We use that time to prepare not just weapons and ships, but hearts and minds. Because when Darkseid comes, he'll try to break your spirits before he breaks your bodies. The only way to survive is to refuse to kneel. No matter what he threatens. No matter what he promises. No matter what horrors he unleashes. You stand, or you're already lost. Picard looked around the room at the assembled representatives of civilizations that had spent centuries viewing each other as enemies. And he saw, perhaps for the first time in galactic history, the beginnings of true unity forged not by politics or treaty, but by the simple recognition that some threats transcended all other considerations. Then we have work to do, he said. Dismissed. All ships, begin coordinating defensive formations. And someone get me a tactical overview of every available asset in the quadrant. We're about to fight for the future of this entire dimension. As the meeting dispersed, Batman lingered near Picard. Captain, you should know what you've just committed to. Darkseid isn't like the enemies you've faced before. He won't be impressed by your ideals or moved by your courage. He simply is, an inevitability, a fundamental force that grinds civilizations to dust. The universe we come from has barely survived him. Yours is younger, less prepared. The odds are not in our favor. They never are, Mr. Wayne. But we'll face them anyway. Because that's what heroes do. And today, we're all heroes. Outside the viewport, space began to shimmer as the first ships of the combined fleet started arriving. Federation starships. Klingon birds of prey. Romulan warbuds. All gathering to face an enemy none of them truly understood, led by 7 beings from another universe, preparing for a battle that would determine the fate of an entire dimension. The final war for the Alpha Quadrant was about to begin. And somewhere in the space between universes, Darkseid smiled. The combined fleet assembled like nothing the Alpha Quadrant had ever witnessed. 317 vessels, Federation, Klingon, and Romulan, holding formation in space that until 48 hours ago had been contested territory. The Enterprise served as the command nexus, its bridge transformed into a war room where ancient enemies coordinated tactics against a common threat that dwarfed their historical grievances. Picard stood at the center of organized chaos, watching tactical displays update in real time as the Justice League coordinated fleet movements with a precision that made Starfleet's best tactical officers look like academy cadets. Superman floated near the main view screen, his enhanced vision tracking dimensional fluctuations invisible to sensors. Batman worked at tactical with Worf, their unlikely partnership yielding strategies that merged Klingon aggression with calculated precision. Wonder Woman consulted with Romulan commanders on boarding tactics, her millennia of warfare experience finding common ground with their philosophy of strategic strikes. Flash vibrated between stations faster than the eye could follow, coordinating communications across the fleet with superhuman speed. Green Lantern maintained a construct network that linked every ship's sensors into a unified detection grid. Cyborg had interfaced directly with the Enterprise's main computer, his hybrid consciousness processing data streams from hundreds of sources simultaneously. And Aquaman, surprisingly, had taken charge of coordinating support vessels and damage control teams, his natural authority translating seamlessly to crisis management. Dimensional rift expansion accelerating, data announced from Ops, his golden eyes reflecting readings that made no sense according to established physics. At current rate, Apokolips will achieve full dimensional integration in 17 minutes, 43 seconds. All ships, final positions, Picard commanded. This is our last chance to adjust formation before engagement. Once Apokolips fully transitions, we'll be facing firepower that makes their scouting fleet look like a patrol wing. On the view screen, space itself was tearing. Not the clean apertures of boom tubes, but a wound in reality hemorrhaging crimson light that seemed to burn the eyes. Through the expanding breach, something vast was emerging, a planet, but one that had been transformed into a weapon. Apokolips. Its surface was covered in fire pits that stretched to the horizon, industrial complexes that could process entire worlds, weapon batteries that could crack moons. And at its heart, in a fortress that dominated the landscape like a cancerous tumor, sat Darkseid's throne. My gods, Riker breathed. That's not a planet. That's a nightmare given form. That's our target, Batman said grimly. The central fortress, the Tower of Apokolips. That's where Darkseid rules from. If we can strike there, disable his command and control, the rest of his forces will lose coordination. You're suggesting we assault a fortress on a planet defended by billions of soldiers while simultaneously fighting off whatever fleet they bring through? Tomalak's voice came through the calm from his warbird. That's not tactics. That's suicide. It's both, Wonder Woman replied. But it's also the only option. Darkseid expects us to engage his fleet, to fight a conventional battle we cannot win. We give him that, a portion of our forces drawing his attention, while strike teams infiltrate the fortress and take the fight directly to him. And who leads this suicide mission? Compek demanded. We do, Superman said simply. The Justice League. This is our fight. These are our enemies. We won't ask your people to die for battles we brought to your doorstep. Noble, Admiral Nechayev interjected, her face appearing on a secondary display from the USS Venture, but tactically unsound. If you fail, we lose our greatest assets. If you're captured, Darkseid gains intelligence about our capabilities and yours. Then we won't fail, Flash said, his usual levity replaced by steel determination. And we won't be captured. We've done impossible before. This is just another Thursday for us. Captain Picard, Superman turned to face him directly, and in those alien blue eyes Picard saw the weight of countless battles, endless sacrifices, and an unshakable conviction that even gods could be defied. We need someone from your universe with us. Someone who understands what you're all fighting for, who can make the decisions we can't because we don't fully understand the stakes for your civilizations. We need you. The bridge fell silent. Every eye turned to Picard, waiting for his response to a request that was simultaneously an honor and a death sentence. Captain, Riker said quietly, if you go, I take command of the Enterprise. But sir, we need you here. The fleet needs unified command, someone who can coordinate three powers that barely trust each other. Commander Riker can coordinate the fleet, Picard replied, his decision made the moment Superman asked. He has my complete confidence. But Mr. Kent is right, someone from our universe needs to witness what happens in that fortress. To understand what we're truly facing. And to bring back that knowledge if, he didn't finish the sentence. Everyone understood the implications. Then it settled, Batman said, pulling up schematics of Apokolips that he'd somehow acquired from Cyborg's databanks. Strike Team, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Captain Picard, and myself. Flash, you coordinate fleet communications and rapid response, your speed makes you irreplaceable for crisis management. Cyborg, you maintain the sensor network and look for weaknesses in their planetary defenses. Aquaman, you lead damage control operations across the fleet. When ships start falling, and they will, you keep the survivors fighting. What about me? Worf asked, his pride clearly stinging at being excluded. You, Batman said, meeting the Klingon's eyes, hold tactical command of the Enterprise. Commander Riker leads strategically, but you're the one who'll make the split-second combat decisions that keep this ship alive. Can you do that? Worf straightened, warrior pride reasserting itself. I will not fail. Good. Because failure means watching everyone you've ever known become slaves to Darkseid's will. 3 minutes to full-dimensional integration, Data announced. Picard moved to stand beside Riker, gripping his first officer's shoulder. Number 1, you have the con. If we don't make it back. You'll make it back, sir. You always do. And if I don't, you know what to do. The fleet cannot fall. No matter what happens to us in that fortress, no matter what Darkseid threatens, the Alpha Quadrant must stand. Understood? Understood, Captain. Picard turned to Troy, whose empathic senses were likely overwhelmed by the emotional currents swirling through the bridge. Counselor, help Commander Riker maintain cohesion among the Allied forces. If fear or mistrust begins to fracture the fleet. I'll handle it, Captain. Just promise me you'll come back. The crew needs you. We all do. I'll do my best, Deanna. The Justice League was already moving toward the transporter room. Picard took one last look at his bridge. At the officers who'd followed him through impossible situations, at the viewscreen showing a fleet united against darkness, at the stars that humanity had spent centuries reaching for, and followed. In the transporter room, Chief O'Brien was making final adjustments to the pattern buffers. Captain, I've configured the transporters to punch through Apokolips' interference, but it's going to be a rough ride. Their planetary shields are generating subspace disruptions that'll make Beeman feel like being pulled through a black hole. And there's no guarantee I can get you back out if things go south. Then we'll make sure things don't go south, Chief. Energize when ready. The transporter pads filled with the strike team. Superman stood tall, his cape somehow pristine despite the battle damage he'd sustained. Wonder Woman had donned her full battle armor, each piece ancient beyond reckoning and proof against weapons that could shatter worlds. Green Lantern's ring blazed with emerald light, a star of willpower in human form. Batman checked his utility belt with the methodical precision of someone who'd learned that preparation was the difference between victory and death. And Picard, in his Starfleet uniform, looking small and fragile beside beings who could reshape reality, but standing with them as an equal nonetheless. Good luck, sir, O'Brien said quietly. Luck, Picard replied, is what you need when preparation fails, Chief. We're not planning to fail. Energize. Reality dissolved into quantum uncertainty. Picard felt his molecules scatter across subspace, felt dimensional barriers tear at his consciousness, felt the hostile presence of Apokolips itself trying to reject their intrusion. For a moment that stretched into eternity, he existed in a state between life and death, matter and energy, possibility and certainty. Then the universe reasserted itself, and they materialized in hell. Apokolips was worse than any sensor reading could convey. The air itself was toxic with industrial pollutants and the acrid stench of despair. The sky burned with perpetual fire pits that stretched to the horizon, casting everything in shades of crimson and shadow. In the distance, massive structures processed raw materials with mechanical efficiency, and Picard realized with horror that some of those materials were organic. Bodies. People. Entire populations being rendered down to their constituent elements to feed the planet's endless hunger. Welcome to Darkseid's paradise, Batman said, his voice flat with the tone of someone describing familiar nightmares. This is what he does to every world he conquers. Transforms it into an extension of his will, strips away everything that makes life worth living, leaves only servitude and suffering. We're being scanned, Green Lantern announced, his ring projecting a protective bubble around the team. Multiple defensive systems locking on. We've got about 30 seconds before they know exactly where we are. Then we move, Wonder Woman commanded, already running toward the fortress that dominated the landscape. Stay close, stay alert, and remember. Everyone on this planet is either a slave or a soldier. Trust nothing. They ran across terrain that seemed designed to break the spirit, industrial wastelands punctuated by fire pits, slave pens visible in the distance, propaganda towers broadcasting Darkseid's will in languages Picard didn't recognize but somehow understood. The message was always the same: submit. Surrender. Accept that resistance is futile and that Darkseid's reign is eternal. Captain, Superman said, matching pace with Picard despite the Kryptonian being capable of crossing the distance in seconds. What you're seeing here, this is what's at stake for your universe. If we fail, if Darkseid establishes his foothold, every world you've explored, every civilization you've encountered, everyone you've ever known, this is their future. I need you to understand that, because what we're about to do requires accepting casualties we'd never accept under normal circumstances. I understand, Mr. Kent. Sometimes the mathematics of survival are brutal. They reached the base of the fortress, and Green Lantern's ring carved an entrance through walls that should have been impenetrable. Alarms shrieked. Parademon soldiers swarmed from hidden barracks, their weapons charging with energy that could kill even beings as powerful as Superman. Go! Wonder Woman shouted, her sword already singing through the air, each strike felling 3 enemies. We clear a path, you follow it. What followed was violence on a scale Picard had never witnessed up close. Superman moved through Parademon ranks like a force of nature, his fists shattering armor and weapons without killing, always without killing, even here, even now. Wonder Woman fought with the skill of 3 millennia, her every movement a masterpiece of controlled lethality. Green Lantern created constructs that held back waves of enemies while simultaneously carving deeper into the fortress. Batman moved like smoke, appearing where he was needed, using technology that seemed almost magical in its effectiveness against foes designed to fight gods. And Picard ran with them, his phaser in hand, firing with the precision of decades of combat experience, coordinating their movements with tactical suggestions drawn from his strategic training. He was not their equal in power, not even close, but he was their equal in purpose, and that mattered. They fought deeper into the fortress, past defenses that would have destroyed armies, through corridors that twisted with geometry that hurt to perceive, toward the throne room where Darkseid waited. Because he was waiting. Picard could feel it. This was expected. Welcomed. Darkseid wanted them to reach him. The throne room doors, massive structures of metal and stone that could have withstood photon torpedoes, stood open. Inviting. Daring them to enter. It's a trap, Batman said flatly. Of course it's a trap, Superman replied. It's always a trap. But we spring it anyway, because that's the only way to reach him. They entered, and Picard saw Darkseid for the first time. He was massive, easily 3 meters tall, but it wasn't his size that made Picard's blood run cold. It was the presence. The sense that this being had existed for eons, had conquered countless worlds, had broken heroes and villains alike across his knee. Darkseid sat upon a throne of stone that seemed to have grown from the planet itself, and his eyes, burning with omega energy that could erase beings from existence. Fixed on the strike team with the patient attention of something that had all the time in the universe. Kryptonian, Darkseid's voice was the sound of worlds ending. You have brought me a gift. A new universe to conquer, new civilizations to kneel before me, new souls to break. And you have brought witnesses from this reality so they might understand what is to come. How considerate. We didn't come to talk, Darkseid, Superman said, his voice steady despite facing the being who'd brought him closer to death than any other enemy. We came to stop you. To send you back to our universe and seal the breach forever. You're not conquering anything today. Darkseid's smile was the most terrifying thing Picard had ever seen. Then make your attempt, Kryptonian. Show me what this universe has to offer. Show me why I should not simply crush you all like insects beneath my heel. The Omega beams fired, twin lances of reality-warping energy that could erase anything they touched from existence. Superman dodged with speed that bent physics. Wonder Woman deflected them with her bracers. Green Lantern's shields absorbed the overflow. And the battle for the fate of two universes truly began. Outside the fortress, the combined fleet engaged Apokolips' defensive systems. Ships exploded. Heroes died. But they held the line, buying time for the strike team, trusting that 5 beings standing against a god could somehow accomplish what 317 ships could not. And in the throne room, Picard watched the Justice League fight with everything they had, knowing that if they failed, the universe he'd spent his life exploring would become nothing more than another jewel in Darkseid's crown of conquests. The real question was, would courage and heroism be enough? Or would they learn, as so many others had, that some gods were too powerful to defy? The answer would determine the fate of everything. The battle in Darkseid's throne room raged with a ferocity that transcended mortal comprehension. Superman traded blows with a god, each impact sending shockwaves through the fortress. Wonder Woman's sword sang as it carved through Omega energy itself, her ancient training finding purchase against tyranny incarnate. Green Lantern's constructs, vast mechanisms of pure willpower, held back the tide of Parademon reinforcements flooding the chamber. Batman moved through the chaos like a shadow, placing explosive charges on structural supports with methodical precision. And Picard coordinated their assault, his tactical mind finding patterns in the madness, calling out weaknesses, turning 5 warriors into a unified force. But Darkseid was patient. Eternal. And as the battle reached its crescendo, he simply smiled. You fight well, mortals. But you fight for a universe that will kneel regardless. I am inevitable. I am. Wrong, Picard interrupted, and the single word cut through divine monologue like a phaser through shields. You're wrong, Darkseid. Because you've made a fundamental miscalculation. You assumed this universe was like all the others you've conquered. Divided. Fearful. Isolated. But you forced us to do something we should have done centuries ago, you made us unite. Outside the fortress, the combined fleet executed a maneuver that would be studied in tactical academies for generations. Federation starships, Klingon warboats, and Romulan vessels moved as one organism, their weapons fire synchronized by Cyborg's consciousness spanning 317 minds. They struck not at Apokolips' defenses, but at the dimensional rift itself, the wound in reality that anchored Darkseid's throne world to this universe. The rift began to collapse. Darkseid's eyes widened, the first genuine emotion Picard had seen from the tyrant, as he felt his foothold in this dimension dissolving. No. Impossible. My conquest is over, Superman said, driving his fist into Darkseid's chest with every ounce of strength he possessed. This universe doesn't belong to you. It never will. Wonder Woman's sword found the throne itself, the god-forged blade shattering stone that had witnessed eons of oppression. Green Lantern's ring blazed with the collective willpower of the entire fleet, channeling their determination into a construct that began tearing the fortress apart from within. Batman's explosives detonated in perfect sequence, collapsing the structure that had symbolized Darkseid's dominion. And Picard activated his comm badge. Enterprise-6 to beam directly to the bridge. Emergency transport. Now. They materialized on the Enterprise bridge as Apokolips began slipping back through the dimensional rift. Darkseid's roar of fury echoed across subspace as his throne world was rejected by a universe that refused to kneel. The rift sealed behind him with a flash of light that would be visible from 100 star systems, a declaration that some boundaries would not be crossed. The combined fleet held formation, weapons still charged, waiting to see if the threat would return. But the sensors showed nothing. Apokolips was gone, expelled back to its own dimension, and the breach that had brought the Justice League here was finally, definitively closed. Silence fell across 317 ships. Then, simultaneously, across every channel, a single transmission, cheering. Federation officers, Klingon warriors, Romulan commanders, all celebrating a victory that should have been impossible. "Mr. Data," Picard said quietly, "status of the fleet." 47 vessels destroyed, Captain. 112 with major damage. Casualties estimated at 18,000. But we survived. Against all probability, we survived. Superman stood at the view screen, looking at the space where Apokolips had been, his expression unreadable. 18,000. That's 18,000 people who died because we came here. 18,000 people who died saving billions more, Picard corrected. Mr. Kent, guilt is the privilege of the living. Honor them by remembering that their sacrifice meant something. In the weeks that followed, the Alpha Quadrant transformed. The alliance forged in battle became the foundation for lasting peace. Federation, Klingon, and Romulan representatives began formal talks that would eventually lead to unprecedented cooperation. Starfleet tactical doctrine was rewritten to incorporate lessons learned from the Justice League. And the 7 heroes from another universe found themselves honored not as weapons or threats, but as the catalyst that had finally united civilizations divided by centuries of mistrust. But they also found themselves stranded. The rift that brought them was sealed. Green Lantern's ring couldn't detect any path home. Cyborg's technology, vast as it was, couldn't replicate the dimensional breach. They were, for all intents and purposes, permanent refugees in a universe not their own. "We'll keep searching," Superman told Picard during a final briefing in the observation lounge. "Somewhere in this universe, there has to be technology or phenomena that can return us home. But until we find it, we want to help. To continue what we started." "The Federation would be honored to have you," Picard replied. "Though I suspect the bureaucracy will insist on official protocols, oversight committees, and enough paperwork to fill a cargo bay." Batman actually smiled, a rare sight that made the moment feel historic. "We're used to bureaucracy, Captain. We'll manage." As the Justice League departed the Enterprise to begin their new lives in a universe that needed heroes but had never expected to find them, Picard stood at the observation lounge viewport, watching the combined fleet disperse. The stars looked the same as they always had, infinite, mysterious, full of possibility. But something fundamental had changed. The universe had been tested and found not wanting. Courage had proven stronger than tyranny. Unity had triumphed over division. And 7 beings from another reality had shown the Alpha Quadrant what it meant to be truly heroic, not through power alone, but through the willingness to sacrifice everything for people they'd only just met. The Federation would never forget the Justice League. And in the years to come, when new threats emerged. And they always did, Starfleet would face them with a lesson learned from heroes who fell through dimensions, that the greatest weapon against darkness wasn't technology or tactics. It was the simple, stubborn refusal to surrender hope. Picard touched his comm badge. "Captain's log, supplemental. We have survived an encounter with forces from another dimension and emerged not just victorious, but transformed. The Justice League has taught us that heroism isn't about power, it's about choice. The choice to stand when others would kneel. To fight when others would surrender. To hope when despair seems rational. They came to us as strangers from an impossible place. They leave as legends who reminded us what we're capable of when we dare to be our best selves. The universe is vast and full of dangers we can't predict. But it's also full of heroes waiting to rise. And sometimes, those heroes fall from the sky when we need them most." End log. The Enterprise turned toward new stars, new missions, new adventures. Behind them, the space where gods had waged war was empty save for debris and memories. Ahead lay infinite possibility. And somewhere in the space between what was and what could be, 7 heroes prepared to forge new legends in a universe that had become their home. Live long and prosper. Hit that subscribe button for more interesting stories.